Good morning, everyone. This is Rob Zile from the Center for Public and Nonprofit Management, and welcome to day 2 of the PMA cohort number 8 project presentations. I'm here with my friend Magnus. He and I are really excited to listen and participate in today's presentations. Our first session was on July 11th, and they were just fantastic presentations. So we are off to a wonderful start. We do have a full slate of projects today. We have a total of 7 presentations. We are rounding third and heading home here on our experience. And again, I just want to say thank you to this cohort in particular. I've really enjoyed the process. I really enjoyed to get to know you. I really enjoyed to see your passion, enthusiasm, dedication, not only to your particular project, the department, and to our team and our cohort as well. It's been an amazing journey. I hope that you enjoyed it as much as we have, and I look forward to continue to see great results, not only through the projects, but hearing back from you as you work on implementing these and taking this back to your home bases. Our first presenter is Donna Oclock, and she is with the Accountancy Board of Ohio. Donna's going to talk to us today about their enhanced communication tools that they're working on. I really actually love it when I was reading the description, the concept of using YouTube videos and short little assignments and podcasts and things like that to help provide more information for Q&As and other ways to connect with your audience. I really love that concept. We're actually starting to incorporate that in our professional development, in our student enrichment activities. And I think it's a wonderful way to kind of use technology and to kind of use the new things that were forced upon us, through the COVID. These are some of the things that I believe are some positive attributes of thinking outside the box, doing things differently, and really making a difference in our community. So without further ado, I'm going to put myself on pause and mute and transfer it over to Donna, and you can take it away whenever you are ready.
Thanks. Good morning, everyone. I'm Donna Oclock, and I work for the Accountancy Board of Ohio. My project for the Public Management Academy program centered on creating updated ways to communicate with our licensees, other organizations and agencies, and the public. All these people are considered our stakeholders. The Accountancy Board is one of the longest serving professional licensing boards in Ohio, established in 1908 to oversee the public accounting profession. The board licenses certified public accountants and their businesses under specific sections of the Ohio Revised Code, which are set by the legislature, and the Ohio Administrative Code set by the board itself. Its mission is to assure the public that services provided by CPAs are performed professionally and ethically, and to fairly and strictly enforce accountancy law and board rules. The profession is standardized across the United States and several other jurisdictions. So Ohio's rules need to be substantially equivalent to those other states, not only to maintain professional standards, but to help CPAs navigate location and job changes smoothly. We are a part of CPA's professional life until well after their career retirement. Most people maintain some kind of license, and very few people formally retire their license. The board has a strong role in protecting the public against violations of accountancy law. Things like unlicensed practice or false representation, failure of licensees to meet practice requirements, and from CPAs who have been convicted of financial crimes or sanctioned by other regulatory agencies. It also works to protect the integrity of the profession. A licensed CPA has passed the same exam, completed the same continuing education requirements, and affirmed their commitment to ethical standards, same as every other CPA. The board is also a facilitator in educating and promoting the CPA profession as a great career opportunity. So why is communication so important? There's so much information out there. The process of being a CPA and becoming a CPA is fairly complex, and many people do not fully understand the process. There's testing, certification, licensing, and maintaining your license. So I pulled this graphic from wallstreetmojo.com. They try to create a simple graphic to show the process of taking the CPA exam and becoming a CPA. And I said, they tried. But it's a little more complex than this, and they actually missed a step in this process, which is the work experience requirement. And thinking here, looking at this little bit of complexity, the CPA exam itself is a series of tests administered at the national level, but each state sets its own education requirements to qualify to take the exam. The exam process itself involves several entities such as the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants, National Association of State Boards of Accounting, or NASBA. Once somebody's licensed, they're responsible for maintaining their license in every state they're licensed in, responsible for being compliant with all the professional standards and their continuing education. So the state boards work hard to maintain uniformity of requirements, but those do change and evolve over time, and it falls to the boards to communicate with our licensees and stakeholders. So the accountancy board seeks to be an agency that our stakeholders can turn to when they need answers to their questions or to point them in the right direction. Before we could take on a project like this, it was important for us to look at our action plan and discover potential opportunities as well as potential pitfalls. Because the accountancy board is a central part of the CPA profession, a substantial amount of time is engaged in communication with stakeholders. So again, potential CPAs, educators, new CPAs, in-career CPAs, end-of-career CPAs, other professional and government agencies, and the public. The profession sprawls across business, industry, academia, government, and all of these entities interface with CPA licensing. Board staff spends substantial time publishing information on its website and answering questions via email and phone. The board's vision, so this is our vision statement here, is to be the regulatory agency that provides quality service through the effective use of technology and best business practices. We needed to reevaluate and evolve to enhance access to that information. Social media and video technology enhanced our static media, and the diversifying stakeholder pool wants a more interactive way to get their information. The days of the fully staffed agency with plenty of time to answer the same questions over and over have passed. And gone are the days when people had the time to search a website for content or time to stop their work and wait for a response to a question. So this project focuses on meeting the board's vision statement, using technology to enhance its communications. So we had to answer several questions here. So what are the information pinch points? This is where information is available, but the person seeking it needs to stop what they're doing and try to find it. I've been calling this the point of the ask. Second, where do our licensees generally get their information? Specifically where they get licensing information, and if what is currently available is easy to find, is it easy to interpret? Then we wanted to start driving information out via social media, but to do it with intent. We didn't want to just post to social. That's really not enough. And we wanted to do this with a measurable positive result. And something else that we had to consider here, because of the size and scope of the profession, is when and if we should create content addressing subjects that are outside of the board's specific scope. Right now, the CPA exam is changing, and that is definitely going to affect our stakeholders, but that's happening at the national level. If we create content around these changes, we had to decide, are we duplicating effort? Are we adding to the conversation? Or are we potentially stepping on somebody else's toes? It was important to create an action plan, assess our true needs, and then address those needs efficiently. In the initial assessment of this project action plan, we did a simple SWOT analysis. While this project is important, as the SWOT shows here, there are several big picture things to consider. So our biggest strength, of course, is our staff. Honestly, I can't say enough about each and every one of them as far as their expertise and commitment to what they do. They are all truly subject matter experts. Same with our board members. They're advocates for the profession, for other CPAs and the public. Since we're the only agency that licenses CPAs in Ohio, we have access to our intended audience. We also have a strong relationship with other state boards and national organizations, so we can exchange information and get feedback quickly. Looking at our weaknesses, time and resources are always at a premium with any state agency. We have 45,000 plus licenses, and we have 9 total staff to administer them. And even though our agency is completely self-sustaining financially, budget cuts mean that we have no wiggle room for project funding. And we're kind of limited in the kind of media we can use and its style. Like we're not allowed to use TikTok. So no TikToks for the accountancy board. Our goals are seen here. Opportunities to help stakeholders get licensing information and to help people who are interested in becoming a CPA, whether they're looking to take the exam or apply for licensure, and be sure that they get accurate information. We want to make the information available at that point of the ask. If you're going through something and usually that's the point where you read something, you look at something, you go, huh? So they can click on a short video or get linked somewhere instead of having to click away from what they're doing to go to the board's website, or they need to call or email us to get that information. Some of the issues that we considered when starting this project was whether people would watch or really care about this new content, or would they just default to calling and emailing as usual, or is the content going to create even more questions? Given that CPEs are subject to many regulations and rules, we knew we needed to be clear and concise with our information and be careful to address board level matters, then point other questions to their source organizations. So from here, we were able to frame the project and work on collecting information. Here's one of our graphs from our survey. In the interest of efficiency, and given we have direct access to our licensees via email, we put together a SurveyMonkey survey and sent it out to about 10,000 of our licensees. So these are people who hold current practicing licenses. And we asked them a series of questions. We got about 2,800 responses, which is not bad. As you can see here, about 80% of our respondents go to our website. The next most common responses were to call or email the board, which is fine. No one seems to go to Facebook, but that did mean that we had an opportunity there to promote that a little bit more. We also asked if they considered the information that they found easy to understand. Yes, in general, and what social media sites they use to learn new information. The board staff also came up with their most frequently asked questions, information, things that they get asked over and over again to help us figure out where the online information could be improved and to get those that information in the spot where we think people are having the confusion. And hopefully we can get some of our direct contact numbers down a bit. I do want to say here that our intent is to make the basic information more easily accessible. We are great at customer service here. We love interfacing with our folks, but what we want to do is make it easier for people to navigate the processes. If they're calling and emailing, it's because they have a unique situation or a unique question. So this pie chart shows a breakout of where our survey respondents go for information via social media. The folks in the other column, they reported things like, they go to the Ohio Society of CPA's website, they get information through CPE courses, through news, et cetera. Since we saw a lot of our respondents were using LinkedIn, we went ahead and reactivated the board's LinkedIn page and decided that we would start posting there and then cross-post to Facebook 2-3 times a week. Based on some general guidance on how to build your following on social media, of course, they recommend regular, consistent posting. And we saw an immediate uptick in engagement when we were sharing our content consistently across both platforms. We also pulled our website and Facebook analytics, and we looked at what was going on before the project began. Our own website is really well trafficked, with a trend of about 2 pages visited by the average user. But our frequently asked questions section, which is literally just like a wall of text, it's not easily found within 2 clicks. Like you need to go and use a search bar. But if you do search via a search engine, that frequently asked questions does come up. So there's a way to get that information. It's just not necessarily that intuitive. Once we had a direction and knew what information we needed to put together, we needed to start the technical and the creative processes. Once we were posting consistently to our established social media, we created a YouTube channel. So creating this media had to be a relatively easy and cost-effective matter. We have no budget for purchasing equipment or having our production outsourced. We use a PowerPoint template, which people are familiar with. We create scripts, which we have reviewed by other staff to be sure that we are communicating accurately and smoothly. And that gives us a means to easily add closed captioning and edit that closed captioning to the videos. Since we were doing our production in-house, we needed to create a process to create, edit, and change things throughout that creation cycle. Luckily, we have a wonderful information administrator, Ricky Johnson, who has experience with media creation, and she has her own podcast. So she's able to use her graphic design skills and her other technical experience to give us feedback on the technical processes. I think this project would have been almost impossible to pull off without her willingness to help and to learn new things. She's really gone all in on this. One of the things that benefit both the creation and viewing of our content is to establish standardization. using the same style, same intro and outro music, and the same language. We're establishing our brand here that people can start to feel familiar with. And because our staff do interact with our licensees pretty regularly, they agree to create content relevant to their own area of expertise. So once we created our first content, we posted it to YouTube and linked it to the board's website, social media, we're putting the links in email, et cetera. We've begun splitting our content a little bit. We are doing, general licensing information and requirements, technical instructions, timely updates, based on the number of questions people have most often. And once we have a few of these under our belt, we're going to start putting together playlists in YouTube, which is a great thing. So actually, we are taping our first podcast episode today, which is about applying for your initial CPA license. We're going to share that via Apple Podcasts and Stitcher. This is one of the things that we had to take time and be sure that our information was really board level and accurate. This is going onto the web and people are going to act based on what we put out there. So getting it right the first time, that's essential. Content that is related to licensing requirements, we're also going to link that via our licensee's online access point, which is the e-license dashboard. This is where most of our licensing questions come from. A person is working, say, on their renewal application, and they have a question. Well, then they have to back out, send an email, call someone, try to find it on the internet. So we can embed short video clips into the application itself. So right at that point where they may have a question, there's something they can click on to get the information they need. So I wanted to just show an example of a script. So once a script is created, it gets reviewed by staff members who fact check, they do a readability analysis and provide any input they might have. For example, this script is an excerpt from a video about registering a public accounting firm. While it seems likely that it would be a CPA accessing this content, and it seems like a standard assumption that a CPA would know the difference between the terms attest, peer review, and non-attest, it is our experience that many do not, even when they are setting up a business that will be performing attest services. So we needed to add those terms and description for our content for those folks, but then we just kept focusing on the registration process. This is not really the place to go into like the peer review process. So get these general information out there and focus it in. Okay, so this is a short video that we made about recent rule changes. This is really great. We were able to communicate directly about important issues rather than depend upon people to follow the rules process. Expect external sources to communicate these changes, or just link to the code, which that can be really intimidating for some people, even though our rules are clear and understandable. I'm going to skip a little bit into this video, so I just wanted to let you know our videos all look like this. The voice intros are the same, and this is a 4-minute summary, so we're not going to watch 4 minutes. So we'll just do the intro and then a little bit toward the end. Hello, I'm Donna Oclock, Investigation Supervisor for the Accountancy Board of Ohio. In this role, I help Ohio's CPAs and firms ensure they are following Ohio's accountancy laws and board rules. Ohio's CPAs and those who seek to become CPAs in Ohio are beholden to Ohio accountancy law and board rules. Laws, also called statutes, are enacted by the Ohio legislature and are part of the revised code, Chapter 4701. The Accountancy Board is authorized to enact rules based on these laws via the Administrative Code, Chapter 4701. Frequently asked questions. Question: do I need to complete a master's degree to meet the 30-semester credit requirement, or can I complete additional accounting credits to meet the certification requirement? Answer: you need only meet the 30 credit requirement in accounting if you did not earn those credits as part of your baccalaureate degree. No master's degree is required. Question: I was convicted of misdemeanor DUI. Do I need to report this to the board? Answer: misdemeanors which do not have an element of fraud or deceit are not required to be reported. Question: my employer lost a civil suit. Do I need to report it? My employer is not a public accounting firm. Answer: it depends. Reporting involves only public accounting firms and individual CPAs. However, if you are a named party in the suit, you do need to report this to the board. Question: how do I report a disciplinary action? What happens next? Answer: please send an email to me, Donna Oclock. My contact information is on the next slide. This final slide provides references to the information reviewed today. Please feel free to reach out if you have questions or need additional information. Thank you for joining us, and post in the comments below any other board topics you'd like us to cover. Okay. So that's just your basic overview, intro, ending with something with questions, and then contact information. We've also done some instructional in-time content. This is a short clip of a how-to video, which we are linking into our firm owners' online portals. Note we're keeping some of the same standardization, but the tone is more casual. It's obvious from this information that it's really specific to a certain part of the license process. So, even if you are a firm owner, you're seeing this part of the dashboard where you need to do this function, very, very little. So this would really create questions if it was your first time to deal with this. So I'll play this clip.
Hello, my name is Kelly, and I am the firm administrator for the Accountancy Board. Today, I'm going to demonstrate on how to add and remove Ohio CPAs from the employer tile on the eLicense dashboard. When you log into your eLicense dashboard, you will see the firm license tile, and then you will see an employer license tile. That is where all the Ohio CPAs that are employed at your firm are managed. You will either have one location or you might have multiple locations of the firm. You will go to that location or that employer tile, click on Options, Manage Employees, and it will take you to the list of affiliations at that location. If you are adding a CPA to the firm location, you will click Add New Affiliation. You will add the CPA's license number. That will populate their name, their license number, and what they are. You will then go down to where the start date is and click on their start date at the firm. If you have any questions or need help, you can give me a call or you can email me. Thank you.
Again, looking at that video, Kelly is our firm administrator. So if anybody's ever interfaced about firm licensing, they've talked to her. So they're going to recognize her voice. And that's going to add a little bit more engagement to the process here. Circling back to project measurables. This table, sorry if it's not clear here, shows our planning and evaluation process, what outcome we wanted, and then the actual qualitative results. Once we understood where we could find information gaps, we moved through to find 6 to 8 of our most frequently asked questions. Then we split that information out to good for video, good for podcast, and then we felt there were some things that we could just link to social media from our website. As we moved through the initial implementation, we really did try to push our presence more on Facebook and LinkedIn. And we did see an increase in engagement on both platforms, 3 times the increase on Facebook post views, and LinkedIn engagement has sort of dovetailed with that, because we're posting both places simultaneously. So that's, partly, I think, because algorithm, is driving that a little bit, but just doing it more often just gets it in front of more eyes. However, some of our more important metrics are ongoing. Our busiest time of the year is between October and December. We have about 10,000 licenses that come up for renewal. So we're going to be linking the heck out of our information materials, and we'll be tracking engagement through this last quarter of 2022. I'm also hopeful that we will keep getting better at creating content and getting it up quickly and then putting it in the right place. Some takeaways here. Some things that I got out of this, using a good project implementation framework, it meant more time and effort at the start of the project, but ultimately it's saving us so much more time on this back end. Database decision-making also takes a little bit more time, but it's time that ends up focused on what's important to everyone, rather than just using gut feelings. Honestly, people are the most important part of any project. I really did learn to lean on the skills and enthusiasm of the staff. even when they were a little nervous about speaking or about what they wanted to share as content, they really stepped up to the plate, and they're doing it for the stakeholders, they're doing it for their licensees and the people that they engage with all the time. So looking forward, we want to keep making content and be more creative while we're kind of curating our content and solidifying that brand. We want to expand our reach and ultimately make it easier for everyone involved. And finally, I'd like to give a shout out to a few people here, to Alexandra and Rob for guiding us through PMA 8, Mary Swierka for her feedback on this project, the PMA group itself for sharing their experiences and know-how, and to our board staff, especially Rochelle Johnson, for all of her technical support. If anyone has questions, I am happy to take those now.
Thank you, Donna. That's wonderful. First of all, before I get started into my questions, I just wanted to say that I think you missed your calling. You should be a voiceover person for those YouTube videos. So, and I'm not sure if you have a side gig or second career, but you might want to consider that. Just saying that you did a wonderful job with that video. We might be calling you actually to help us do our videos, because that would be awesome. But anyway, I wanted to say that this is fantastic, because and here's one thing that I really loved about it. I love the fact that you actually said call me, and had your phone number and contact information, emails, phone number, because I can't tell you how many times I'm trying to search out information for my personal, if I'm having an issue, or even trying to get a hold of governments to contact them for the Public Management Academy. And I go online and there is no way to get a hold of anybody. Or it's like, send us your information and then we'll call you type of thing. So I think from a customer service perspective, that was amazing from the contact information part. And then the other part that I really love is how you zoomed when you were answering questions, specific issues. Obviously, that's wonderful. But then also the other presentation about that person, when they clicked on the actual website and says, here's where to look. This is what it looks like. This is what I'm referring to. That visual aspect of things, I think, is key. I'm a huge visual learner. So being able to walk through a website or a page or a Q&A sheet or whatever that situation is, I think is going to be invaluable. So my question is, have you had any has this gone live, or have you had feedback, or how will you get feedback from your stakeholders to see if this is on target, and how will you make adjustments down the line?
So I think, we send everything out. So board staff go first. We send it out to our board members. They give feedback. I'm hoping that once we get through the renewal process, that more people will, do things, comment on Facebook page, comment on LinkedIn, maybe comment on YouTube. I want to do another SurveyMonkey survey, maybe in February of next year, just to get a little more feedback. Did you watch any of these videos? If you did, were they helpful? Just to see where we stand. But I'm hoping that view metrics will help. And also we keep track of our calls. So we will track calls. I'm hoping that, again, some of the basic things get lower, because if we're getting the same calls about, ethics requirements, we get hundreds of those calls. Where's the disconnect? So we need to focus in on that. And I think that will happen during the renewal process.
I have one short question to follow up on that, and then I'm going to pass the baton over to Alexandra. So just as a reminder, if you have any questions or chats, please feel free to submit those to us. But have you noticed freeing up any of your staff time as far as answering routine questions, or the things that are redundant that have kind of bogged down the system? Has there been any kind of evidence of that yet, that you'll be able to have more staff time because of this, or is that still yet to be determined?
Yet to be determined, but Kelly's video is pertinent right now. We are renewing business licenses, so she is tracking that very closely with past to see if that those questions about EMPL licenses, about logging in, if those go down. So we are so busy between October and December. That's where we'll know. To address Peter's question here about project continuity, I hope so. I think she's very good at explaining the process as well. So she's been educating and training me a little bit too, but we'll just keep it up and do the best we can. We're trying to use simple tools.
Thank you. Well, I'm going to pass the baton over to Alexandra because she'll be the moderator for our Q&A part. Some of the guests might not see what the questions are, so she'll read those off and address those. So take it away, Alexandra.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. So we do have a few comments before we get to our questions. So your peer review partner, Mary, said that you hit it out of the park. It was great. You took a dry subject and made it interesting. It was a pleasure working with you, and it was very clear and practical. Eric also is very impressed too, and I think you intimidated him a little bit. All right, so we do have some additional questions and comments. So Jared says, I think having a personal number is great. Is there also an email or phone number for the board that customers can reach? Or is there a plan in place for updating videos as turnover happens?
We do plan to keep things updated. So as things change or refresh, and we're resharing things all the time. But again, as people move on, we are using the simplest tools we can find out there. So, and we're all getting our training with that as each of us do that. So as people move on, we can fill the gap until we get somebody else. And we may not get somebody else that has as much media creation experience as Ricky does. So we're just going to keep going. That's why we're keeping it simple. Like we're not trying to like recreate anything or be, influencers. We just want to get the information out there.
Kay asks, well, first of all, she says great presentation and project. Love the way to outreach to CPA. If Facebook is not being readily used by CPAs for finding information, would this be a viable site to be used, or would other sites that are being used, such as LinkedIn, be better utilized for information?
Yeah, I think when we looked at our Facebook analytics, and we knew this about Facebook, nobody goes to Facebook anymore. I mean, you're not going there for your board information. So we reestablished our LinkedIn page, which gets a little bit better views. And I think the algorithm, actually connects the two things. So if you look at it on LinkedIn, you're going to see it later on Facebook or vice versa. So we really leaned into LinkedIn as a better way to get information out. And Facebook can be our secondary.
Brian says, great job, Donna. It seems you got a high response rate from your survey, 30%. Are you considering doing a follow-up survey to understand how often the CPAs are using the new material?
Yeah, as I mentioned before, we want to do another SurveyMonkey survey probably in the beginning of 2023, just to reach out to maybe the folks who just newly renewed and say, hey, did you watch the videos? Did you, were they helpful? Do you think this is a good format for folks? We'll see what kind of response we get. So our people actually, they're really committed. CPAs are really committed to the cause. So they do usually respond back, even for surveys.
Okay, great.
Well, thank you. Thanks, Alexandra. I had one more question. It's probably a dumb one, like usual. Is there any other like partner organizations, other state entities or local ones, or that you can also share this? And you might have mentioned this already, but is there other ways besides the social media platforms to get that cross-fertilization going?
Oh, absolutely. We have a professional organization, the Ohio Society of CPAs. So they get the initial, link to the content so that they can share it out if they want to. We don't have Twitter, and so we don't share that way, but our National Association of State Boards will also share this content on their pages. Our podcast will be linked from the NASBA page on initial licensure, for applying for the CPA exam.
I keep getting dumb questions that just pop in my head. I could probably put myself on mute, but are there other state entities that are doing similar things like this that they share information with you all that you pass along, or is it pretty much you have to stay within state, type regulations, stuff like that?
We do. We are just right now, we're just sharing static information from say NASBA or the AICPA because of the CPA evolution. If there's testing things, we share that out. Other state agencies, we're it for the CPA profession. So some of the boards have little short clips, or they have put up like their meetings and things like that. But as far as help doc things, there are a few, but not many.
Again, I think this is a great project, and thank you for starting the day off on high bar here, so I think you intimidated a few of the other presenters, but that's always good because it keeps the adrenaline running. So thank you very much, Donna, for your presentation, and look forward to seeing how this evolves over time. So congratulations.
All right, thanks so much, Rob. Thanks, everyone.
Without further ado, I'm going to want to promote our next presenter, which is Mr. Jeffrey Husami, and he is from the Ohio Department of Transportation, and he's going to work on something called competent person training for ODOT, which is a federal requirement, OSHA requirement. And so he's going to talk about how to implement the project across 4,000 employees.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for hopping on this morning and listening to my presentation. So today we're going to focus on competent person training for the Ohio Department of Transportation. So again, we'll be talking about competent person, but a little bit about me, biography before we get into the presentation. My name is Jeff Husami. I'm a safety and health program consultant for ODOT. I've been here for 7 years. I've been doing safety the whole time I've been at ODOT. I graduated from the Ohio State University in 2016. I'm also an authorized OSHA outreach trainer for general industry and construction. So what that means is I'm able to issue 1910 and 1926 OSHA 10 and OSHA 30 cards, which is a pretty heavyweight barrier for especially private sector industry. A lot of big construction companies require you to have either a 10 or a 30 to even enter on the job site. ASHE. I'm also an ASHE First Aid CPR AED instructor. That stands for American Health Safety Institute. And then I'm also a certified occupational safety and health manager. It's a COSM credential. So some of our objectives today, we're going to talk about what is a competent person, why is competent person training required for employers and employees, how will we implement competent person training here at ODOT, and what content will be covered in competent person training, and then the benefits of competent person training. So competent person, So the term competent person is used in many OSHA standards and documents. In OSHA, how OSHA defines competent person is one who is capable of identifying existing and predictable hazards in the surroundings or working conditions which are unsanitary, hazardous, or dangerous to employees, and who has the authority to take prompt corrective measures to eliminate them. So this is accomplished by way of training, experience. A competent person is knowledgeable of applicable standards, is capable of identifying workplace hazards relating to the specific operation, and has the authority to correct them. So essentially what competent person breaks down to is you're trained for the job task at hand, you have the experience to recognize the hazards, and you have the authority to correct them and make a decision. So think of a supervisor, a lead worker on the job site, somebody who has the knowledge, expertise, and then can also speak up and say, hey, we need to make a change here. We need to do this, do that, whatever needs to be done to make the job more safe. So competent person training is required for employees working in construction, general industry, and maritime. So we're really, what we really focus on is 1926, that is construction, and general industry, that's 1910. And I'll explain those two things here in the next few slides. But for this competent person training, we're really focusing on the construction side of things. So what is competent person training required for? So here's a little table that kind of puts it in perspective of what OSHA requires for general industry. So what is general industry? General industry is warehouse workers, garage workers, mechanics in the building itself. So what is required for competent person training, if you're working with powered platforms, health environmental control, personal protective equipment, welding, cutting, and brazing, and electrical hazard communications. Now for construction, we're talking more field work, right? Working out on the right of way, building a new skyscraper, a warehouse, anything along those lines is what construction typically is, anything out of normal maintenance. So there's a lot more in this field that is required for competent person training. So OSHA requires competent person training if you're dealing with blasting and explosives, concrete and masonry, cranes, demolition, electrical, excavations, fall protection, general safety and health, health and safety controls, ladders, material handling, PPE and life-saving equipment, scaffolds, stairways and ladders, steel erection, toxics and hazardous substances, underground construction, welding and cutting. Now, if your agency or your company does not work in scaffolding, like for instance at ODOT, we don't use scaffolds. You know, we're not building our own buildings. That's typically contracted out. We rarely use scaffolds. So that's not something we're going to, have to train our employees on. Same with steel erection. We're not really doing any steel erecting. That's more for steel workers, iron workers. So that's not something we have to cover with our people. So why is competent person training required? It's the law. OSHA is a federal agency, and every standard and regulation they put out is passed by Congress. So this is stuff that we must adhere to. And it also enables employees to recognize hazards and abate the hazards. And it ensures a safe and healthy workplace for all employees. And it saves money. We'll talk about that later on in some of my slides. I start to talk about the cost saving by doing competent person. So we'll dive into that a little later. But I wanted to talk about the general duty clause. So I wanted to before we dive into the plan, I always try to put things into perspective. Why is this so important? Why are we doing this? What's the reasoning, right? I really find that with a lot of the younger generation, they ask why a lot. I've come to find that out. A lot of the younger people work in our agency, they always want to know why. So I've tried to get better with explaining that and able to answer those questions. So the general duty clause is put out by OSHA. This is kind of their umbrella, right? So if they don't have a specific standard for a safety violation or anything like that, they always refer to the general duty clause. So it kind of covers everything. So what the general duty clause is, it's each employer shall furnish to each of his employees employment and a place of employment which are free from recognized hazards that are causing or are likely to cause death or serious physical harm to his employees. They shall comply with occupational safety and health standards promulgated under this act. So it also talks about the employees as well. So each employee shall comply with occupational safety and health standards and all rules, regulations, and orders issued pursuant to this act, which are applicable to his own actions and conduct. So not only does the employer have to create a workplace free of recognizable hazards and keep their employees safe, the employee has some accountability as well, right? The employee has to be following the safety standards and rules and all that stuff. So I wanted to talk a little bit about Occupational Safety and Health Administration, OSHA. So why are we here? What got us to this point? Why are employers now required to do so much extensive safety training, develop, put so much money into it, develop so much content and train all their people out on the work sites and jobs? So OSHA was created in 1970 through the signing of the OSHA Act. This act was signed into law on December 29th, 1970 by President Richard M. Nixon. The administration was charged with safeguarding workers from death, injuries, and illness as a result of their actions on the job. And OSHA standards and regulations are passed by Congress. So kind of piggybacking on my couple slides ago, it's the law. This isn't made up creative writing. This is stuff that your agency or your workplace has to be in compliance for. And OSHA finds out, things can get a little tricky. So taking a step back, so we at ODOT are a state agency. So I wanted to talk a little bit about PERP, which is the Public Employment Risk Reduction Program. So as we talked about, 1970, federal OSHA was established. In 1973, governor's executive order signed bills for safety and health protection for executive branch employees. Well, they come to find out that they're not really getting the full protection for government employees. So OSHA started to notice this. So they came out and they said, hey, you guys as state workers, municipality workers, city workers, township workers, county workers, they said, well, there's no one protecting you guys. There's no one overseeing you. So they asked each state to either adopt OSHA as their state plan or to develop their own. So here in the state of Ohio, we developed PERP. That's the Ohio Public Employment Risk Reduction Program. The act was passed in 1992 under House Bill 308, and it came full effect in July of 1994. And then July of 2005, PERP became part of Ohio Bureau of Workers' Compensation Division of Safety and Hygiene. So there really wasn't anything governing state employees, township employees, until PERP kind of was put into act. So to kind of bring it down to simple terms, OSHA sets the regulations, OSHA sets the standards. PERP is the enforcer. So if you're a government worker here for the state of Ohio and you have a random inspection on a job site, it's not going to be OSHA coming out there. It's going to be PERP coming out there. But PERP adopts all of OSHA's standards. So if OSHA says it, we have to follow it, but it's PERP doing the enforcing, if that makes sense. So employer requirements. So employers are required to satisfy OSHA and the general duty clause. So how can an employer do that? Employer can do that through competent person training, OSHA outreach training, and various other safety trainings. You know, you have to be trained before you go on a piece of equipment. You just can't hop on a bulldozer and have at it, right? You have to make for sure you undergo certain type of training for that piece of equipment. Technically, you're supposed to have training on anything before you use it. I mean, we're even talking simple as a dolly, according to OSHA. You know, you got to be trained on how to use that. So now getting into the project side of it. So here's a map of ODOT. I wanted to put things into perspective for everybody. We're all over the state. We're everywhere. We're in every county. We're all the way down in Southeast Ohio, where the hills, you know, one traffic light for a whole town. And then we go to Northwest Ohio. I like to call them the Flatlanders. You know, you can watch your dog run away for a week up there. So there's so many different, not only terrain, but personalities, different type of people. I mean, I've had the pleasure working out of our central office location and visiting every district and nearly every county at this point. And it's just miraculous on how different the personalities are and attitudes are depending on where you are in the state. So what is ODOT made up of? Well, 88 counties. We're in every single county. We have at least one facility in each county. We have 120 plus locations. So majority of counties have at least 2 or 3 facilities in them, one main county garage, and then several outposts as well. We have 13 districts. So if you looked at the map, that was 12 districts, but we're going to call a central office District 13, just for simpler terms, make it a little easier to understand. So central office where I'm at, we'll just call District 13. We have 4,000 employees, so we're quite big agency. We have reduced dramatically. I think in the 90s, we were running at 10,000, but we've since, you know, a lot of more work is contracted out. So we've reduced our size. And the big state motto, I know some of you who are with state agencies know, do more with less, right? That's a big push. We have 3,000 highway workers. So any given day, you know, we have about 3,000 people on Ohio state routes, Ohio roadways, out in the motoring public. So ODOT employee health and safety staff. So what is our staff for the safety side of the house? Because this competent person training needs to be implemented by somebody. So who's going to implement that? Who's going to do the training? That is going to fall on our safety staff. So who are we? What are we comprised of? Where are we located? So we have one statewide administrator who's central office employee District 13, one assistant statewide administrator who is my direct supervisor, Marcia. I believe she is on the call here. So thank you for hopping on, Marcia, and taking a listen. We have 13 safety and health program consultants, one per district. So I'm the safety and health program consultant for central office, and then we have one per each district. We have 12 safety inspectors, 1 to 2 per district. So this varies. Right now, we're having a lot of turnover, a lot of people moving in and out. Some districts, we have 2 inspectors. District 7 out in the Dayton area, they don't have an inspector at all, actually. They're just a one-man show out there. So train the trainer, how are we going to implement this and across the state? So we're going to provide training and guidance to our district safety staff. So in order to get them ready to push out this competent person training, we are going to develop train the trainer in order to make sure they implement this properly out in their district and their area. So the PowerPoints, we're going to provide them with PowerPoints, handouts to use for the training, exercises. So there are some things that need to be involved in this. And we'll talk about that later as we go on, but some of them are going to be, trenching and excavating. So we're going to try to bring an excavator out to the training and do some digging, let them see the soil types, let them understand it more, because that's a big deal when you come to protect yourself in a trenching and excavating job site. The classifying that soil is a make or break, that tells you how you need to approach it with your protective systems. It'll be a 2-day training. We'll have them come all down to Columbus, District 13, and then cost savings. There's a lot of cost savings for doing this in-house. And again, I have a slide later on the PowerPoint where we'll really touch base on how much money we can really save for the state of Ohio and our taxpayers. So competent person training topics. So 3 main things we're going to cover for competent person training here at ODOT. So this program is really going to be focused on confined spaces, trenching and excavation, and fall protection. Those are going to be our 3 main focuses for this competent person training we're going to roll out across the state. So defining a confined space. So we're going to define a confined space, discuss the distinction between permit required confined space and a regular confined space. So what is a confined space? A confined space is an area that has limited means or access to, is not meant to be, is not designed to house workers. So think of a culvert, think of a utility room, a vault, something along those lines. Those are confined spaces. Now, a confined space and a permit required confined space are 2 different things. A permit required confined space is something that you need to fill out a permit before entering. You need to get approval before entering that, because there could be potential, or it could have hazardous materials within that confined space. So a good example is like a manhole cover, right? So if you're going down to a manhole cover, there's gas lines running in that manhole cover and high electrical volt, conduits running through there as well. So in that instance, there's some hazards in there, or potential, since we're going to be doing work down there, potential for those hazards to be exposed. Maybe we'll hit a gas line accidentally, whatever. So we have a permit required form filled out before entering that. All of our confined spaces need to be marked. We'll review 1910-146 OSHA standard on confined space. We'll talk about written permit required confined space, signage for confined spaces. All confined spaces need to be marked. Employees have the right to know that that area is a confined space. Entry permits, we have that set up through an online portal, and also some hard copies as well that employees are able to use. So when entering a confined space, there needs to be a team there, essentially. It's not just one person and going down there. So there has to be an entrant, somebody who's entering the confined space, an attendant, somebody who's at the top at the entrance of the confined space, a supervisor on scene, and then a rescuer. So you need to have a rescue operation. Now, can the rescuer be the attendant? Yes, it can kind of cross a little bit over, but you have to have a plan. That attendant needs to have some sort of communication with that entrant. So if they're going too far, do you have a walkie-talkie? Are you able to communicate? In case things go south, the air down below can get a little tricky. You know, there's less oxygen, there's a potential for more, you know, there's a lot of weed growth in there. That lets off a chemical that could displace the oxygen. So if there's a lot of growth underneath the surface, that could potentially make someone go unconscious. So we'll talk about the duties of confined space workers and training for confined space workers. So we'll talk about fire protection. It's required to have a fire extinguisher, ventilation, hazardous atmospheres. Do we have a ventilation system there? Hot work permit. Are we going to be sawing, cutting, welding underneath the ground in a confined space? Engulfment. Think more of a farm silo, right? A grain silo, something like that. They have inward converging walls. There's potential of engulfment. Pinch points and rescue operations in-house. It's actually required to have a rescue team on scene when you're entering a confined space. You can't just rely on the fire department. So that means having a tripod, having a winch, hooking the person up to that in a harness, full body harness. So we're able to, if they do become unconscious in that confined space, we're able to reel them out of there. So our next section we'll be covering would be trenching and excavation. So we'll give them an intro to the OSHA and ANSI standards. This is covered under 1926, 650, 1926, 651, and 1926, 652. We'll talk some key compliance issues and compare and contrast a competent person with a qualified person and also with a professional engineer. So if we're digging a hole, anything 30 feet or deeper, you got to have a professional engineer. Actually, it's 20 feet or deeper. I apologize. 20 feet or deeper, you have to have a professional engineer who has to sign off on that. You can't just dig a hole, you know, that deep without having a professional engineer develop, you know, what is your protective systems, and they have to sign off on that. So there's required manual testing and visual testing before we're digging. Soil types are Class A, Class B, and Class C. That's really important because depending on that soil type is the difference between how you're going to protect yourself. Site inspections, the site needs to be inspected every day prior to working by the competent person. Further discussion of other hazards that could have come, fall protection, overhead, underground utilities, 811 dig, we got to call OOPS. So the way excavation and trenching is defined, if you are as simple as putting your shovel into the ground, that is defined as an excavation. So you have to have an OOPS ticket. So you're putting in a new mailbox at your house, you got to call OOPS to do a ticket on that. And there have been scenarios where people didn't call and they hit a fiber optic line, which runs, you know, the internet, cable, all that stuff. And that can get very, very expensive. There's some stories where a guy knocked out a cable line for going into Chicago O'Hare Airport and was charged like, I think $100,000 an hour for every time it was out. So it can get very costly. So call 811 dig. It's a free service if you're digging. And then protective systems. So hydraulic shoring, sloping, benching, and trench boxes. Here at ODOT, our main thing is trench boxes because we're working out on the side of the right of way and you can't really slope out because you got traffic right next to you. And then emergency actions and rescue techniques, we'll discuss that. So some of the exercise we'll do, we'll try to get a backhoe out to the training so we can actually pull some soil samples, dig a little deeper, let people see how the soil looks, hand-on exercise using soil. So there's a way to test soil to make for sure to know what we are getting ourselves into, what protection we need. So we can use a pocket petrometer. There's a thumb test and a ribbon and thread test. And there's certain ways of doing that with soil. So our last section that we would be covering would be fall protection. So we're going to be identifying fall hazards on ODOT work sites, slip, trips, and falls, walking surfaces, fall from elevations, including work platforms, ladders, things of that nature, roofs, leading edges, aerial lifts, and bucket trucks. You know, when you are on an aerial lift, you see those lifts, they're working on traffic lights, they'll be working on, buildings, skyscrapers, whatever it is, you have to be tied off on those. You need to have a full body harness when using one of those. Any relevant OSHA and ANSI standards, and then equipment weight limits. You can't overload your equipment. That could get ugly. Guardrails, we'll talk about what are the requirements when it comes to guardrails. There's a specific requirement out there for them. I believe for the top rail, it's about 42 inches, give or take an inch or two. And then for the bottom rail, it's about 21 inches, the mid rail off the ground. I mean, there's specific requirements you must meet. And again, they might seem minuscule to us right now, but if OSHA gets called out on your job site or PERP, they're going to measure that stuff. And if they see an issue, they're going to write it up, and you have to correct that. And if you don't correct that, you're going to be facing some hefty fines. Materials, we'll talk about wood, metal, rope, manufactured, personal fall rest systems, so the ABCs, care, maintenance, and storage of body harness. So what does the ABC stands for? That's anchor points, body harness, and then connection. So you need something to tie off to. That's the anchor point. You need a body harness to wear to protect yourself, to hold you in place, and then a connector. You need a connection to connect to that anchor point. So that's either through a self-retracting lifeline, a snap hook, a carabiner, or a shock absorber. And then also there are some incidents where there's nets, where you can put a net underneath, like say there's a big bridge project being on, they may put a net underneath for extra caution. So we'll talk about training along with written plans and ODOT procedures, job hazard analysis. So we'll take a look at certain jobs and break them down and what hazards are and how we can fix them. Incident and near miss reporting. Emergency rescue plans and rescue techniques. If you truly fall, and that's a lot of force coming down, you're free falling, depending on how far you fall, that could be 3,000 to 5,000 pounds of pressure. So that's a lot. There's going to be some additional health concerns with that scenario. So who are the ODOT employees who need trained? We're focusing, so like I mentioned earlier, competent person training is more focused on supervisors, managers, lead workers. So we have 88 counties, and what that entails, that's 88 county managers. Now, there are some additional managers out there because we have district headquarters within counties. So for instance, in District 3, which is Ashland County, right? They have an Ashland County garage, and they also have a District 3 headquarters that has managers as well. And they each operate, practically the same, but they do have some different departments. So there's going to be some more than 88 county managers. Transportation managers, these are kind of the mid-level managers at counties. So they're the direct reports for a lot of the highway workers out there. And we have about 2 to 3 per county. So we're looking at 200 plus transportation managers that need trained. Highway tech 4s. So typically when a highway tech gets to level 3 or 4, they're become a lead worker. And we have about 300 plus of those across the state. And then over 500 ODOT employees are going to need competent person training. That's a lot of employees. And the reason I wanted to talk about this is we're going to roll into cost saving, not only by doing the training in-house, but avoiding PERP violations. They do issue fines. So competent person training rollout, each district safety staff will be required to train competent person training for their own district. So they'll be in charge of their own area. Central office will support each district if needed. So if there's any assistant needed to come out there and train, teach, that's what we're here to do as central office. Class sizes will typically range between 20 to 30 employees per class. It's 2 days of instructing per class for the competent person training. There'll be about 50 to 75 employees per district will need trained. And each district will have 2 to 4 sessions depending on needs. So talking about cost savings, so vendors charge anywhere from $500 to $1,000 per person for competent person training. So we start to break down that math, we're looking at 500 employees, we're getting into the 100,000 plus mark there. That's a lot of money, something we can save not only the agency, especially in this budget conscious world, but also taxpayer money by conducting this training in-house. Not only saving money through the training, but now we're going to have a competent person on the job site. We're going to have, you know, be able to recognize those hazards and make changes. So if PERP were to come on the job site, you know, will be compliant, right? Because PERP can issue fines. Now OSHA can get a lot more expensive. So from some private sector companies, OSHA can issue fines upwards to hundreds of thousands of dollars, and they can put you out of business if they want. Now with state agencies and PERP, they can only issue $10,000 per each violation max on their fines. Last time I checked, that was their cap. It may have gone up since inflation and everything. I know OSHA's penalties are tied in with inflation. So inflation went up, what, 9% this year? Their fines went up 9% to go with that. I don't believe this PERP goes up with inflation, but they may have made some adjustments. But last time I checked, there's still $10,000 is a lot of money per violation. So that can add up, especially with a place like ODOT. You know, we got 4,000 employees out in the field every day, moving and grooving. That's a lot of job sites, a lot of little construction areas we have going on. So benefits of competent person training, we're going to prevent injuries and accidents. Average worker comp claim cost $43,000 in 2019. So that can be pretty expensive. So by making sure we're training our supervisor and lead workers to assess the job site, assess the work area, be able to prevent those hazards, prevent those injuries and accidents before they happen, that can save us a lot of money. So not only are we saving money, you know, through training in-house, we're saving money through preventing worker injuries, you know, and you're not just, you know, that's just $43,000 for that specific workers' compensation claim. What about production? You know, now you have one employee off the job site. You got to retrain someone else to take over that job. So retraining, training new personnel, and then morale. You know, you see a coworker get injured, that's not good, right? No one wants to see that. Someone you've spent years with working every single day. The last thing you want to see is them get hurt. So that's definitely going to change the morale within the group. So there's really a lot of benefits that don't necessarily have a dollar amount on them either for competent person training. So wrapping up, competent person training summary. So it's an 8-hour training per day. It's a 2-day training. There'll be exercises involved. We'll have some dirt samples, try to get an excavator out there in order to test soil, because they really need to know how to do that, right? In order for them to assess the job, make sure they have the right system in place, they have to know how to do all those things as a competent person. We'll have some guest speakers come to the training, and then we'll have a pre-test and a post-test. I love doing that. It shows the progress. I use the same test. So you give them a pre-test of the same thing, see what they know before you even teach anything. And then at the end, you give them the same test and kind of see how they've progressed throughout the training, what they've really retained, right? So we'll have a pre and post test for the training. But that's all I have for this presentation for competent person training. I know it's not the most exciting stuff, it's just safety training, but it really is important things that we are required to do as employers, even in private sector or public sector. So any questions about what we talked about today? I'll take it back over to you, Rob.
Thank you, Jeffrey. I got to tell you that I never realized how involved. I mean, you have to know a lot of stuff about a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And so I just want to say that you did a very thorough presentation, and I definitely appreciate ODOT workers on the side of the road already, but just understand kind of what the risks, the trials, tribulations, and the threats that they're at. I'm glad that there's somebody like you and your team to make sure that they're trying to be safe and sound as possible, because it is, at the end of the day, you know, we're trying to be, you know, as efficient, effective as possible. We're talking about people's lives, you know, and their livelihood, and also, you know, just being able to, you know, keep things in a costly manner as well. So I want to say thank you for doing that. And I only had one quick question. You kind of answered at the end. You did a pre and post question, but how do you know, like, is there any other evaluation or assessment component built into it so that you can verify that, yes, they are competent in their competence?
So playing in the world of OSHA loves to leave things vague and open-ended and never back themselves in a corner. So they put that on the employer to determine that. So as the employer now, if they come and have to do an audit on you and see what all your training records are, they're going to ask what tests did you have, and if it's only 1 or 2 questions, what color is the sky, they're gonna fine you for that and write you up. But it's really up to the employer what you deem is right for your agency and for your people. So.
Right. All right. Well, we're going to stay on track. So I'm going to zip with my dumb questions. I'm going to pass the baton over to Alexandra. So take it away.
All right, thanks, Rob. We do have a few questions and comments. So I'm going to start with the comments. So Brian says, great work. It seems like a huge task given the number of employees. Good luck with implementation and cost savings.
Yes, yeah, it's a lot of employees, a lot of different breathing parts. So thank you, Brian. I appreciate that comment.
Kay says, great presentation and depth of information for the training. I have been through the 30-hour safety training for OSHA. Great way to keep everyone up to date on the competent person training.
Thank you, Kay. And yes, that I do a lot of those trainings. Unfortunately, it's hard to make this content very exciting because it's just OSHA standards and regulations and stuff like that. But hopefully you guys took something from it. And if you ever have any safety questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me. I've read those books too many times. So.
Eric also agrees that it was a great presentation and very informative. And then I'm going to transition over to 2 questions from Donna. So Donna starts off with saying, great job. This was a really informative presentation. How will your training differ from the other required OSHA CP modules?
So we already have a lot of training within our, we have our own department for training where we do a lot of onboarding for standard safety training for our regular highway workers. We actually have something called the HT Academy where we cover pretty much everything we do. The crane portion, if the person is using that, we talk about highway safety, chainsaw chipper. So we cover a lot of different trainings that way. This training is more for that lead worker, somebody to be able to step in. Hopefully that answered your question. Hopefully I understood it correctly. That makes sense.
So Donna also asks, what risks are there, if any, of taking this training in-house?
So there really aren't, that is a good question. So I wouldn't say there's much risk to it. Like I was talking to Rob earlier, answering his question, it's really up to the employer to mandate that and develop their own course. I guess it would be easier just to pay a vendor and do it, but we have some very knowledgeable safety staff here at ODOT. We have some safety staff with master's degrees, with safety degrees. So they're just as knowledgeable as any vendor to help us develop this class. But yeah, definitely putting it on a vendor would definitely put the liability more on them, but I think the cost saving outweighs that risk, at least for us at ODOT.
Thank you so much. In the interest of time, I'm going to pass it over to Rob.
Thanks, Alexandra. Thanks, Jeffrey. Great job, and best of luck as you continue to roll this out. We're going to transition to our next presenter just to keep the train on the tracks and on time. And that pun was intended because we're transitioning to our friends over at the Greater Cleveland Regional Transit Authority. And I'd like to invite Kay Satula to present. And her topic is on something called transit sustainability.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Kay Satula. I work for the Greater Cleveland Regional Transit Authority. And my topic is RTA Climate Action Plan. So giving a little bit of history, RTA did have a sustainability program. We had 2 dedicated staff members However, both staff members left those positions for promotions in 2020. We were also ISO 14001 certified. We lost that certification, and talking with the members who were heavily involved in that, it was very paper driven and it was difficult to manage. We also had a recycling program. It was eliminated by the contractor due to contamination. And so currently all of our recycling is going to the landfill. In 2020, we created our new strategic plan, and sustainability was identified as a high topic in that plan. And we also have, through FTA, Federal Transit Administration, and the American Public Transportation Administration, they both have sustainability programs, and we're heavily involved in both the FTA and the APTA programs. So this is something that we wanted to make sure that we were involved in their sustainability programs as well. In 2021, President Biden enacted the greenhouse gas emissions for the US. He identified 50% reduction of 2005 levels by 2030 and a net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. So APTA and FTA both got on board, created their sustainability programs in line with the president's plan. Currently with the FTA, there are 171 transit agencies participating in the Sustainable Transit for Healthy Planet Challenge, and this includes the Greater Cleveland Regional Transit Authority. We had to develop climate action plan. It's built on existing programs. We have to set the greenhouse gas emission targets between 2025 and 2050. And then we also create goals and strategies with measurable indicators. Because we receive funding from the FTA, future funding may be determined if we are not participating in this program. So we want to make sure that we are doing everything we can to ensure future funding. So our climate action plan, we wanted to set our baseline as 2018. This is due to, it was pre-pandemic and we had robust data. Tracking emissions, we are tracking scope 1 and 2. Scope 1 are the direct emissions from the vehicles like our buses and our cars. This is a calculation by vehicle emission factor. It's a greenhouse gas protocol. And scope 2 emissions are the indirect emissions. So this is energy that we are receiving from a third party. So for our trains, they are all electrical. Facilities, we have heating, cooling, lighting, and electricity. And this data is multiplied by the emission factor for the utility grid, and that's EPA's emission factor. So in order to review this plan, we are doing a Plan, Do, Check, Act through the Deming program. It's an environmental sustainability program, and we're also looking at continual improvement on that program. So just to give you a little history or knowledge about RTA and who we are. So our transportation services are throughout Cuyahoga County. It's 457 square miles, 59 municipalities. We have over 50 bus routes and over 4,000 daily trips and 5,700 bus stops. We have 2 BRT lines, bus rapid transit lines, and downtown trolley. On our rail side, we have heavy rail and light rail. Heavy rail has 18 stations and 76 miles of track. It goes from the west side on Hopkins Airport to the east side at Windermere Station. For light rail, we have 34 stations, 62 miles of track, and it goes from Tower City to Shaker. Paratransit is our ADA door-to-door service. This is directly operated and purchased transportation. So we do outsource some of our paratransit routes. In 2018, we had 644 active revenue vehicles. These were CNG, diesel, and propane. 157 active non-revenue vehicles for support, carpooling, or specialty equipment. We ran 21.3 million revenue miles, 35.2 million passenger trips, and that equates to 164.6 million passenger miles. So how much is 164 million passenger miles? Well, just looking at the world, the equator itself, traveling around the equator 6,610 times. It would take 17.3 days at 60 miles per hour to go around once. However, it would take Superman 1.3 days to go around the equator once, but nearly 24.5 years to go 164.6 million miles. So in 2020, our new strategic plan, the mission is connecting the community, and our vision is leading the delivery of safe and creative mobility solutions and community connections. In the strategic plan, we've identified areas for sustainability and recycling. So our milestones for the external plan, and this is we have to submit the climate action plan to FTA. We had to do that by April. We created an internal steering committee, an external steering committee. We presented the information to the Board of Trustees, and then we submitted the plan to FTA. And we are currently in the final results for the CO2 emissions in 2022. So by month, we are constantly getting those measurements. For our internal plan, we are focusing on the internal recycling marketing program, and that began in May. So for our external plan, we had to create the baseline, look at the prior sustainability program, the current metrics, define the sustainability metrics, create our recommended practices, track our progress through APTA and EPA. We created a pestle analysis and then report to FTA. So on our pestle diagram, I looked at the political, economic, social, technological, legal, and environmental aspects of creating this program, what would be involved, how it would be involved, and that this gives us more of a guideway toward next steps. So for our calculations, we are looking at everything called water usage, air emissions, greenhouse gas emissions, greenhouse gas savings, the energy use, recycling and waste, operating expenses, unlinked passenger trips, and vehicle miles traveled. Now, the operating expenses, unlinked passenger trips, and vehicle miles traveled are reported yearly to the FTA by the National Transit Database, or NTD. So in 2018, our carbon dioxide emissions per passenger miles traveled were 103,000 metric tons of CO2 emissions. Scope 1 was 37% and Scope 2, 63%. Passenger miles traveled is the sum of the distances ridden by each passenger. And again, this is reported to the FTA through the National Transit Database. So we also determined the emission goals. For our fleet of buses, it's greenhouse gas emissions per vehicle miles traveled. We want to reduce, our goal is 30% by 2030 and 100% by 2050. On our rail side, it's emissions per vehicle miles traveled, and that's 30% by 2030. On our facilities, it's emissions reduced by 40% by 2030. Energy sources producing energy or producing electricity, we want to produce at least 2% by 2030 and 100% clean by 2050. On our ridership side, we are hoping for pre-pandemic levels by 2030. A 10% increase over 2018 ridership by 2050. And our aspirational goal is a 20% increase over 2018 ridership by 2030. So the Climate Action Plan, we measured 2021 emissions compared to 2018. So in 2021, our total carbon dioxide emissions were 81,000 metric tons. That is a reduction of 21.8% compared to 2018. So we are well on our way to our goal of reducing carbon dioxide emissions of 30%. However, when we look at the passenger miles traveled, the pandemic really put a dent in our ridership from in 2020 and 2021. So because of the pandemic, ridership decreased by over 50% in 2021. So you actually see in the graph on the right-hand side, our greenhouse gas emissions per passenger miles traveled actually increased. And that is because the passenger mile or the passenger or ridership decreased. Our service level did not decrease or increase from 2018 to 2021. We've had the same amount of service through each of those years. So for our stakeholders, we've had internal stakeholders, various departments and employees within each of those departments. Our external stakeholders, we have a variety of agencies within Northeast Ohio. We are sharing best practices and information between each other. And we are trying to ensure that what we do together and help Northeast Ohio as a whole. We are also working with other transit agencies in Ohio and nationwide and seeing what their climate action changes are and how they are reducing their greenhouse gas emissions. So now I talked about the Climate Action Plan that was sent to the FTA in April. I will now focus on the internal recycling program and how we are going to do things for the recycling program and revitalizing that within the authority. So again, we have our plan. We had a meeting with facility maintenance, engineering, and our waste vendor. Also a preliminary meeting with marketing on how we can market this program through the agency, getting more representation and more ownership to recycling. We created a recycling presentation that was sent to each of the districts through our internal TVs. We also created a recycling marketing program for RTA. Phase 1 will be actually started in August, and that is focusing on paper and plastic bottles. And then we will do an assessment of contamination. If it's under 1%, that is our goal. We will then focus on phase 2. If it's not under 1%, we will refocus on phase 1 and what do we need to change. Phase 2 then will be on plastics and aluminum cans. And then again, do another assessment of the contamination and make sure that it is under 1%. And so now I will focus on what we've presented to the authority on what is recycling. So a typical disposable lunch creates 4 to 8 ounces of garbage each day. Well, if you compile that each day for a year, that would equal 67 pounds of garbage in 1 year. That's a lot of trash. So what does this mean? Well, RTA has 2,200 filled positions. So if we each had that equivalent of garbage in 1 day, 1 year would be equivalent of 37 heavy rail cars, the weight of the garbage, or it would cover the Browns field in 18 feet of garbage. Only 34% of the items that we put in the recycling bins are actually recycled. The remaining items go to the landfill because of contamination. So China was the largest importer of recyclable materials. However, they ended the importing of these materials due to high contamination. And since they've ended that program, no alternative for recyclable materials has been found. So what is contamination? It's putting items in the recycling bin that are not properly cleaned, or they have food or oil residue on them. They can also be unrecyclable materials or specialty recyclable materials tossed into the recycling bins also. So if you have one yogurt container that still has food in it, everything within that recycling bin will now go to the landfill. The solid waste department will not be the ones to take out those with contamination. They are throwing everything into the landfill then. And the same with the specialty recyclable materials. Batteries have to be specially recycled. If you put batteries into a recycling bin, everything gets tossed. There are many ways to reduce waste, but not all are equally beneficial. The top 2 most preferred ways of reducing waste is actually to source out reduction and reuse things. The second most is doing recycling and composting. So how can we help as an authority? We can reduce waste by reusing products or recycling those that can be recycled. So how do we do this? So we can reuse items. So choosing a washable or reusable product over disposable items. Instead of a plastic bag, bring a tote. Instead of using paper bags for holidays or birthdays, create your own bag that can be reused. Instead of putting lunch in a Ziploc bag, use containers that can be washed. And instead of bringing a water bottle or a plastic bottle, actually get your own water bottle that can be reused and refilled. So there's 5 ways to recycle correctly. The first way is leave recyclables loose, not bagged. Plastic bags get tangled in the sorting machines. Now this can be a area of contention because I know where I live in Strongsville, they asked all the recycling to be put into the blue plastic bags. We do not have a container to put recyclables in loose. If you do have recycled plastic bags, you can recycle those at retail locations. However, just recently, Giant Eagle and most of these areas, Marks, Target, Walmart, etc., they are no longer using plastic bags and asking you to bring your own tote. Make sure it's clean and empty. So once you finish that yogurt, make sure you clean it thoroughly so there is no contamination, no residue within the container. Once that's done, then you can throw it into the recyclable. Greasy pizza boxes cannot be recycled. For cardboard, keep it dry and flatten all cardboard boxes. Only recycle core items and know the core items for your community. For us at RTA, this includes aluminum cups and cans, cartons, glass bottles and jars, paper and boxes, and plastic bottles and jugs. Recycle all other specialty items. Batteries, we can recycle all batteries at any district, and this is near the facility maintenance areas. And then join a recycling media community. So in Cuyahoga County, there are several different communities that you can join. If you want to find out what types of recyclables are for your community, there is a link on the Cuyahoga County website for recycling in your community, and that goes to your specific area, whether it's Parma, Lyndhurst, Strongsville. Now, since I created this presentation, TerraCycle is a new company that we just found out about. TerraCycle partners with facilities around the nation and the world, and they recycle waste that's not locally recyclable. So this can be industrial waste, which RTA has, regulated waste such as bulbs and batteries, aerosols, PPE, medical waste. We do have the plastic gloves. So they also reuse with partnerships. So they collaborate with different brands and manufacturers. And they also have innovation partnerships for residential and office recycling. Now we have connected with TerraCycle, and we have a meeting with them next week with our facility maintenance and our engineering departments to see how we can help and they can help us. We'd like to partner with them to see what we can do to eliminate most of the trash that we have or the waste that we have. And with that, I would welcome all of your feedback, and thank you so much.
Great job, Kay, as usual. I wanted to brag about you. You put in a lot of the technical stuff from our course and from the Lean Ohio Boot Camp. So I just want to recognize that about the Can Do, Check, Act, and some of the other topics. So thank you for that. I do have a question though, and I get in trouble with recycling all the time with my wife because I'm not doing the following. So how do you hold people accountable internally there? Like, is there a process in place to make sure that people are following these procedures? And is there like a carrot/stick program to either encourage people to follow these requests, or is there a mandate? Like, how are you enforcing it, I guess, at the authority?
Well, that's going to be the difficult part. As Brooklyn had found out, it's really difficult to change people's attitudes and change people's ways of doing things. So what I'd like to do is, because we're starting small with the plastic bottles, how many plastic bottles within the main office building, having a competition between the floors. If you have plastic bottles, how many of those are you recycling? Is the recycling, is there any contamination with it? If so, you get dinged for so many points off. So we're trying to create a competitive way to make it fun. And then once we do a small area, we'll open it up to the other districts as well, and still have that same competition through each of the districts.
Is there a way to like reward people for or recognize those that are the champions? I mean, maybe you said that, but I guess what I'm saying is there like a way, like my wife, I guess, no, our friend at the university hospitals actually got like a recyclable lunch bag or other things like that. Do you have those kind of things that you can help to reinforce these concepts?
We've done that through the PASS program, as well as we are currently doing that. So there are, within RTA, you'll see many, and I've got one here, many recycling bottles, things like that, that we've passed out to all of the employees. We passed out totes. Like I said, we have this information going through the TVs at each of the districts just to increase the awareness and the knowledge of what recycling is and what we are trying to do, both on the climate action plan as well as the recycling program. So I think if we can at least get the competition going, then we can look at how we can reward employees. Maybe it would be, something else that we would give out as a thank you.
Yeah, I mean, maybe you can give them a free trolley ride on the green. I'm going to pass the baton over to Alexandra. Take it away. Great job.
All right, thanks, Rob. So I'm going to start with some comments. We do have a few comments from our attendees. Tiffany states, great presentation. I have been trying to think of ways to increase this at the park level, and you had some good insights.
Let me know if you want any information. I would be happy to share.
Matthew says, very informative. I hope I am being a good steward of recycling, but will improve given your recommendations. Thank you. And then Natoya also says, very educational, demonstrates the direct relationship between sustainability, finance, environment, and health. Very true. All right, so we do have one question so far. For those of you who are out there, feel free to continue sending in your questions for Kay. So Jonathan asks, has there been any discussion about the EPA limits placed with greenhouse gases by the Supreme Court?
Not that I know of right now. However, I know with the act that President Biden submitted in 2021, I'm sure there will be more coming.
Great, thank you. He also says, nice job.
All right, thank you. Thanks, Alexandra. Thank you, Kay. as usual, knocking out of the park. I'm not surprised. I just want to give it a quick shout out to Jonathan, I think Tom, and also Natoya for jumping online with us, our friends from the Regional Transit Authority there, and Natoya Walker Minor. Also, an additional shout out. She is actually one of our statewide advisory board mentors, and personally is a mentor and a coach for me, especially with the development of this program statewide. So I just wanted to say thank you all for coming and supporting Kay and supporting us. And Kay, also, thank you very much for your support to help get the OCPM program to where we are to this day as well. Thank you, RTA friends. And we are going to move on to our next presentation. I'm going to call to the stage Mr. Matthew Larch. He is with the Ohio Department of Developmental Disabilities.
All right, my name is Matthew Larch, work for the Ohio Department of Developmental Disabilities. I'm here today to talk about our proof of concept of replatforming EMBS into microservice architecture. And as Rob was saying, many of you probably don't know what I'm talking about. So the agenda that we're going to go over here, product overview, the history and need, the differences between a monolithic and a microservice application, what is a microservice, some strategic features, some competitive analysis. We're going to move into the plan and track path to microservice, the action plan, product roadmap, how did it go? You're going to love that. And our status updates. Go over an overview and execution plan moving forward. History and need. DODD is modernizing our applications. We're transitioning many of our applications from a legacy .NET and Dynamics platform into Salesforce and more modern .NET applications. We're introducing quite a few new tools. One of those being MuleSoft as our API choice. Our legacy system decisions, not a great match for Salesforce due to the complexity, due to the calculations that are being made within the application. Salesforce is a wonderful platform, but there are some limitations that we need to watch. So what are our options moving forward? We have to look for reusability, scaling, reduction of maintenance costs. We need proof. We need proof that these are viable, that they're going to work and be successful. Product SWOT analysis. Strengths. Microservice architecture is extremely reusable, flexible, testable, and scalable. It's ideal for a product that is used heavily on a single day. What does that mean? Our applications have a flux throughout the week. Some days, especially on Wednesdays, we have a lot of provider interaction with our application. The number of people that actually hit our applications exceeded our capacity at one point, and we had to increase the resources on our server just to handle that. That's a manual process currently. We would like to see the scalability option to where the application recognizes we have a lot of traffic. Let's increase the resources automatically. Weakness. Our current developer knowledge is limited on the architecture, and it'll take some extended time to put into design. Complicated architectures with a lot of benefits have a lot of knowledge transfer and learning that are needed. We are ramping up into this, making sure that we have the appropriate staff with the knowledge to be successful. Our opportunities. Rapid prototyping, like this POC that I'm going to describe, will allow for flexibility on decisions for the final architecture. We have not made up our mind on where we're going to land. This is one option. I think it's a viable option. The threats. Monolith applications are difficult to reverse engineer. Attention to integration points is paramount. Many of our applications are very tightly bound. The integration is to a point where a change in one directly affects a change in multiples. So understanding that architecture, understanding the impacts, and not relying on one huge application to try to manage all of this is a benefit for us. So the technical strategy recommendations: leverage the design principles, coding strengths from current developer stack. Improve our platform understanding, eliminate platform weakness, and port existing code first. We're going to exploit development advantage by pushing resources and scheduling milestones, keeping track of the plan, making sure everything is lining up. Allocate scheduling resources to update and mature granular objects to maintain technical expertise. I'm a child that grew up in the 80s. I love this video game and its versus. Punch Out, you got Glass Joe versus the Challenger. Challenger in this would be microservice architecture. And we're going to see how this plays out. Monolithic versus microservice. So the monolithic architecture, one single large system, self-contained, difficult to understand unless you completely go through everything that's involved. Microservice architecture, granular functions that have been broken out and very well understood, small, linked, reusable. So what is a microservice architecture? It's a small independent service that works independently, which means on its own, along with other microservices in order to accomplish a larger task. They carry out their own business functions, their responsibility without having direct dependencies to other services. They can be replaced. They can be updated. They can be modified, independent of any other interaction, which allows for deployments that are easy to do. It allows for understanding that that service is working, or if it has a bug, easy to identify where that is. The monolithic architecture, on the other hand, is a single-tiered software application, uses the interface and data access, business logic code, all combined in a single program, single platform. Microservices give us the ability to use multiple languages, multiple platforms, multiple technologies. You don't have to choose one. Having a mix of different technologies, different languages, very beneficial for the future. You can introduce the brand new shiny object in, see how it works. Not reliant on updating every other function, every other integration. So that maintenance ability and reduce in time, reduce in cost, that's something I'm very interested in. Strategic features. Componentization via service. It's independently deployable, and the components are encapsulated. They're all self-contained. Second feature, smart endpoints and open pipes. It's decoupled, but it's cohesive. You receive a request, you apply the logic, and as appropriate, you produce a response. Decentralized governance. Aids and service contracts involving independently. I keep saying independently because it is such an important topic in application design. Whatever the need, whatever the tool you want to use it. Decentralized data management. Each service has its own database. Different instances or the same database technology. They could be entirely different database systems. One could be SQL, one could be Oracle, one could be Cosmos. It's called a polyglot persistence. Deployment automation, CI/CD, continuous integration, continuous deployment. You include that with the ability to have automated testing, you get boring deployments. Boring deployments are stable, no surprises, everything is expected and succeeds. That's what I like to hear. That's what I want to get us to. I want our deployments to be boring, no surprises. Last feature I'm going to talk about is the design for failure. If any service fails due to unavailability, the client can respond to this gracefully. It does not crash. It can fail over, it can replicate. We won't have a failure just because of one function hiccup. Competitive analysis for microservice architecture. Some of the Amazon research shows microservices cost a lot less when you're in short number of hours. As you increase those hours and the resources required, the cost does go up. But a monolith application, it costs you the same no matter what. Well, what does that equate to in dollars? Monolith application is going to cost the same amount regardless if it's 11:30 at night or 9 o'clock in the morning. Microservice architecture can scale. That's one of the big functions. To that, 9 o'clock, it scales up to the demand. Runs throughout the day, and when traffic drops off, so does the service. So you don't have the cost all throughout the night. Communication channels for a monolith application. We're specifically talking about team member interaction and the communication in between developer A, developer B, project manager. For a monolith application, the more complex it gets, the larger it gets, the more people you have on the team. Those number of communication channels expands exponentially to a point where developer A doesn't know what developer B is doing. It's not a good place to be. Having a small team, no more than 5 people, allows for better communication, transparency on what's going on, and an understanding of the entirety of the build. So competitive service, create a reusable identity service. Core of any application is the way it interacts with the trust. The information that you accessed is correct and safe. It's reliable, scalable, reusable, and offers flexibility in design, allows for future development without reliance on old technology. Maintainability is the key in cost reduction, creating small granular functions that will decrease our expenditure on maintenance. simplify deployment, simplify failure detection, simplify continuous integration. The path to microservice overview. No one starts as an expert in microservices. Any architecture really takes a while to understand. And you start out, you don't have any microservices in your organization. Level one would be just the base architecture. Level two, you define a hybrid where you have a mix of monolith and microservice architecture. Level three, you define, you get standards, you understand the complexity and how to control it. Level four, where we all want to be, domain-based events, hexagonal architecture, and event-driven management. You continually refine, you continually improve the application for the business need. So what's my action plan? Have the responsible parties involved. Our product launch was in January. We did analysis, we created ERD diagrams, that's entity relationship diagram. We also did a data diagram to show commonalities. We tried to break those apart to show potentials. This was on a monolith existing application. We created containers, created relational databases. We created APIs, test some external integration methods, run performance tests to show the scalability, do some load tests to show scalability. So what are the resources required? I have to have developers that have knowledge of a base of C#, Azure, Entity Framework, and .NET. Databases that are being used, SQL, Cosmos. Architecture, we're going to use Azure Platform with microservice architecture and relational databases. The infrastructure side is Azure and APIs. The desired outcome is an application that's easily maintained, it scales to fit demand, and is responsive and flexible to our user base. Our roadmap, in January, we did the initialization. February, we reviewed the ERD diagram, data diagram. March, design sessions. Design sessions were heavy. We had a lot of good discussion there. April, re-platform activities. We started the work. In May, breaking apart into granular service, granular function, started to create some APIs. Final checks and submissions in June, and review and findings in July. That's the plan. How did it go? Served out great. Just like the Titanic, everybody was amazed. Big, beautiful ship, unsinkable. Great idea. We did run into some problems. Jack and Rose. It didn't go so well. We sank. But you try, you fail, you learn, you try again. Sometimes you fail. I'm hoping you learn from each one. And sometimes you fail so bad, you got to start over. But eventually, we'll succeed. Status updates. Oops, went too far. Status updates. We identified the team, we allocated the resources. We have the existing application, created some ERDs. Moving through, everything was going swimmingly. Wonderful, awesome. Around May, we started to notice some real issues. And by June, we knew we were sunk. We had some limitations due to firewalls. We did reach out to the owner of those firewalls, try to get some cooperation there. It wasn't timely enough to be successful during our POC timeline. We checked the functionality, ran into some failures, and the framework issues, not good. Unfortunately, we took a classic ASP application and tried to apply that in a cloud-based platform, updating to a framework of .NET 6 Core. That's a huge leap if you know what I'm talking about. It's essentially 25 years of technology updates in a single try. Logic mapping. Situational priority needs. We needed a scalable platform that had a lot of integration, was responsible and reusable. The inputs we had, training, cost, time to deliver, consistent integration coverage. My team, wonderful developers, can't say enough about them. John, Praveen, Atesh, awesome job. Our DAS resource for the eye accounts and firewalls, and then our Microsoft development support engineer. The features: configure the firewall, create resource groups, create the containers, lift and shift, which is moving that application that currently exists and putting that into the cloud, and then create microservice 1. We put it together, use APIs to retrieve the data, create microservice 2, link those via an API, and show the single process. What did we accomplish? Microservice architecture was viable. Classic ASP applications require a complete rewrite, no lift and shift. Major limitations on control of environment is a problem we're working on. We will have much more communication and transparency there in the future. Microservice architecture is self-managed environment. The increased cost of initial setup must be weighed. Rewriting application in .NET 6 Plus is suggested moving forward. So the potential success or failure indicators: engagement of controlling partners, lift and shift with breakout function success, permission to create, modify, delete configuration settings. Got to have that. Some of the hours were tracked of the effort. About 100 hours is what the developers spent on this. I, on the other hand, spent a lot more time. Estimated completion effort, we should have at least 250 hours for a viable POC. So lessons learned, what went well? Blob storage upload was smooth and quick to configure. Azure was great on that. Service bus message queue was responsible, faster than expected. Expansion is available, and the listeners are easy to set up. Empowered decision-making authority worked well with the developers. They enjoyed it as well. Constant updates to me. Right-sized team, keeping the team at 3 developers, great communication. Applying knowledge learned directly to a project, having the ability to fail, I fully support. This is a proof of concept. We needed to know what worked, what did not. Having a small, well-understood application to work on allowed for the immediate identification of problem areas. What was an obstacle? Lift and shift didn't work. Writing to an on-prem database requires firewall access. Upgrading frameworks, no, not going to happen again. Having a file store with multiple nested directories on-prem, we got to move that to the cloud. Firewalls and permissions to configure, lots of delays there. We need to create a new ASE environment, which is app service environment. Multiple responsibilities of projects running at the same time. Context switching is never good. Concentration is preferred. And when you're constantly being bombarded here and there, you never get the first thing done. Control over the platform. Next steps. We're going to evaluate an on-premise microservice architecture. We're going to start planning for complex system rewrite. We're going to own the access or have cooperation from the owner. Peripheral controls are needed. We're going to learn from our mistakes. That's the whole point of the proof of concept. Design integrations first, design data architecture. We're going to separate the data presentation service layers in the design session, and we're going to take full advantage of the security in Azure in the state of Ohio model. I'd like to thank the cohort, Rob, Alexandra. Really enjoyed the class. Thought it was great, and I'm hoping that you have some more insight about microservice from this presentation.
Thank you, Matthew. So I had no clue what the heck you were talking about at the beginning. I still have a little knowledge of all the details that you mentioned, but I have an example, and maybe it's not appropriate, but we run into a snag all the time in my job where we're trying to have different departments communicate with each other. So if something goes in the system, one department has it through their application, but then doesn't go to the next application. And then so there's a delay in trying to get things processed through. And then it's like if we run a program, for example, and it has to go through these different departments, whether HR or payroll or sponsored research, whatever, nothing is running smoothly, and it takes all this extra time and redundancy double checks. And then also there's stuff that falls through the cracks. So this might not be anything, my problem might not be anything what you're trying to address, but I've always asked, like, is there a way that we can have it so that it runs smoothly through the entire system and that we have accurate, consistent data and reports and access to things? And the answer is like, no, it doesn't exist. It doesn't work that way. So, and I don't know if that's the case or not, or what you're trying to address, but my point is, listening to your presentation explains to me why some of these things are so complicated, why it is a hassle, and we have to add extra time into our procedures to account for these different things, which is a hassle. But I want to compliment you on two things. I mean, the technical stuff, I have no idea what you're talking about, but the willing to fail, learn from your mistakes, and then challenging your team, like push the envelope, is fantastic. Because when I get sick and tired of hearing is we can't do that, or it's never going to work. Like, so we're going to sit here for the next 40 years and do the exact same thing the wrong way, or can we apply principles that what you're referring to as far as like recreating the wheel and trying to reinvent ourselves? So I want to compliment you on that, and I also love the fact about how you said you learned from your mistakes and that you're going to take this as an exercise, but then yet the next time you go about it, you're going to know exactly what those obstacles and hoops to jump through and some of those errors. So there's companies out there, I'm not going to promote anybody, but there's companies out there that are purposely have that in their culture to saying, hey, let's do this. We know we're going to fail. We know we're not going to get exact, but we're at the end of the day, we're going to be able to accomplish some amazing things. So I guess I want to say congratulations on this. I think it's an investment in the future, not only the operations of your organization, but I believe government as a whole and our culture has been like, well, we can't do that, so let's just forget it. And I appreciate champions like you, no, seriously, that are pushing the envelope, that are saying, no, we're going to try to challenge this and try to. So I do have one question. You said the packing it up and shifting it over, that's not going to work. But I believe there's a significant change in innovation and advances in technology. So for future like new initiatives, is there a way for you to get approval from your agency or end users to kind of use your new approach as you start to add new things to the system? Is that something that could be a possibility or not really? I mean,
Absolutely. My assistant CIO, Braden Lake, wonderful. He really pushed us to either fail or succeed. And that failure, we learned a lot from. So applying that in the future, which surprisingly was widely accepted that we are going to move forward. We are actively collecting requirements for a microservice architecture product, and we will be starting work on that very soon. So the lessons learned, we're going to apply directly to our work for production release. And I'm really excited about that. The support that I get from the leadership team at DODD, it's absolutely wonderful. Jeff Coffey's been there the whole way, kind of supporting, saying, hey, you can do this. You know, we have the right people, we have the right technology. Let's go ahead and move forward with it. So I'm really happy what we learned, how we're going to apply it. My developers, great group of guys, and I'm sure we'll be successful in the future.
Yeah, I agree. And I'll finish my comment by saying that the reason why I want these to be public presentations is that maybe there's another peer in a different department that is looking at this and maybe can take on that challenge to push the envelope in their organization as well. So I wish you best of luck at in your department, but hopefully this is a start of a new philosophy in state.
We're doing great things at DODD. If anybody's interested in joining us, it's a real eye-opening challenge. We're doing exciting things. We're using new technologies. It's great.
All right, Alexandra, over to you.
All right, thanks, Rob. In the interest of time, I'm going to breeze through the comments, and then you have one question so far. So Brian says, what an incredible presentation. I loved your slides, so creative and clever. Thanks for making the information as digestible as possible for a non-IT person.
I know it was a lot. Yeah.
Eric says, sorry, it didn't work out the way that you expected, but it's cool that you tried it. And then Kay says, great presentation. It's a think tank in action. I loved it. Continuous improvement and innovation keeps the project moving, even through the failures. Great job. All right, and then we do have a question from Peter. So Peter asks, what obstacle surprised you the most during this process?
The configuration time. I did not expect that it would take as long as it did to actually go in and change the configurations in the ASE environment to meet what we were trying to accomplish. So that has been identified as a key area that we're going to improve on. We have some training that's going to be going on and really understand the nuts and bolts there.
I also have a criticism from Eric, not to you, but to me, that I left out the fact that the reference to Punch Out was awesome. So he wants to make sure that that is verbalized as well. So with that said, we are actually out of time. So I'm going to transition it back to Rob. If you have any additional questions for Matthew, please contact him directly or throw those in the evaluation. Thanks.
Thank you.
Well, I just wanted to say on that you can place the blame on me instead of Alexandra, because that's very sensitive to me. My nickname growing up was Glass Joe because I was a weakling and getting bullied all the time in school. So, and I would play that game growing up as well, Matthew. So it brought back a lot of memories. And that's Glass Joe was the only opponent that ever beat in the history of the game. So sort of pathetic that way. But I do love that game, and that's I do also want to compliment you on adding some humor to your presentation about the Titanic. When you first brought up the first slide, I'm like, I think that's the Titanic, but I hope he's not going in that direction. But anyway, that was pretty. I appreciate the comedy there and the humor, and that's a nice way to balance things out. So congratulations.
Thank you.
All right, well, we're going to jump into our next presentation. We are perfectly on time. Our next presenter is Miss Holly Martin. She's also from the Ohio Department of Developmental Disabilities. I think she has a fascinating project here. It's called the Zen Initiative, and it kind of deals a lot of contemporary issues that we're all facing right now due to a lot of folks that are leaving office, the great resignation that we have, and also the stress and strain that we're under, both in our personal lives and what's going in the global, the national situation here with all the COVID and all things we're dealing with from that perspective. So I really want to say congratulations to Holly for all the things that you've put together for this, and things that you work on over the past year, and I'm interested to see how this all works out. So without further ado, pass the baton over to you.
Good morning, everybody. Again, my name is Hallie Martin. I am with the Ohio Department of Developmental Disabilities. I work at one of the 8 developmental centers in the state of Ohio, and my center is Tiffin Developmental Center. My project is called the Zen Initiative. I wanted to give a little backstory of what Tiffin Developmental Center has been over the last long time. So we started out as the National Orphans Home. It was constructed on 650-acre property in 1896 with the cottage theme. Buildings were named after the state that helped pay for where the children came from, because children came from all over the country. So many cottages have the state of New York or Utah, Garza is a different building. And the orphan children's father were a part of the Order of United American Mechanics. The state of Ohio then purchased the property, and it functioned as an epilepsy center. And then a short time later, it was a state hospital. In 1981, it became Tiffin Developmental Center, providing for residents who have developmental disabilities. It also became on the National Register of Historic Places as a district. So in 2017, our center was one of 2 who became a pilot program for just to serve children, and specifically only children. That pilot went on for 2 years, and after the 2 years, we became the only center who serves children. So the pandemic hit, and it rocked our world. In the beginning, staff were told not to wear masks as it would scare or disrupt the lives of our individuals. Once we started to see COVID hit at one other center in particularly, we were told, okay, now you're going to wear a mask in front of the individuals. Some individuals did not mind the mask, while others would try to take the mask off your face. As the positive cases hit the center, now staff had to wear gowns, masks, goggles, face shields, all while doing their normal everyday work with our individuals. 2 years later, we're still wearing masks in the buildings and around our individuals. The pandemic really caused stress for not only our staff, but also our individuals. So the pandemic crisis, staff were getting mandated, which is forced overtime. Mandation went from 574 in 2019 to over 1,100 in 2022, and then over 4,000 in 2021. So not only our staff who dealt with our individuals on a day-to-day basis, this also increased management to go to the homes and work for our staff, because staff were getting mandated several days in a row, working 16 hours in gowns, masks. It was a crazy time, and we needed to step up and support our staff and work the homes too. Because there were so many mandations, staff were retiring, they were quitting, and staff were let go at high rates due to call-offs. I've worked at TDC for 5 years now. In that time, we have separated with 344 staff from various positions, and we've only hired at approximately 321 of them back. So that shows we are losing at a rate higher than we can even hire people. This hit our direct care staff the hardest because this crisis also influenced maintenance, housekeeping, and other personnel that had to fill into their positions. This also increased the behaviors of our individuals. Behavior holds were more frequent In 2019, we had approximately 953, and that jumped to over 1,300 in 2021. Staff had so much on their plate, and not only at work, but also at home. Staff didn't know which way to go, and they didn't know which way was up or down. Staff were exhausted. So a little facts, 76% of healthcare workers reported exhaustion and burnout. During the pandemic, I believe it was over 39,000 Ohioans had died from COVID. 5 people die by suicide every day in Ohio. 39% of healthcare workers said that they did not feel like they had adequate emotional support. Nurses were even less likely to have an emotional support at 45%. So I thought, how can I help? So I created the Zen Initiative, which means peace and calm. I wanted a place where staff could just take a breath, inhale, exhale, and just take a couple of minutes to themselves in a stressful situation. 83% of workers suffer from related stress. 25% say their job is the #1 stressor in their life. About 1 million Americans miss work each day because of stress. 76% of US workers report that the workplace affects their personal relationships. So my Zen initiative, the objective of this project is to provide unique spaces at work for staff to be able to take time to themselves to improve their mental and physical wellness. In turn, this will also improve relationships with the individuals who we serve and to make TDC a more positive environment. The primary goal is to use this project to make a positive difference in the daily lives of staff, while also improving staff retention for many years to come. The mission, the Zen Initiative is aimed at creating calming spaces that can be used by our staff to help gather their thoughts, give time to relax, give a change of pace, and to help people have better rapport between staff and individuals. This will provide mental health wellness and support to our staff. My SWOT analysis, the strengths, I had amazing support from the superintendent who let me run with this idea. This can also be enjoyed by our staff and our individuals. The weakness, I thought I would have trouble getting buy-in from staff and also the buy-in from other departments. I was also trying to figure out who will maintain and keep contact with the community once we go to outside services, and not enough money. Opportunity, and involved with the community and gives a safe environment to release stress. Threats. We are union, so the union may feel that part of the project is working out of a classification and not having the funding for keeping up with the program. The Zen Initiative project was a goal from the very beginning of class. I knew at that time I was an investigative agent, and I knew I was part of the cause of some of the staff stress. So in March, I switched positions and I went to HR for recruitment and retention. So I was trying to figure out, how can I really help these people? Also in March, the importance of finding a balance of work, home life, and stress hit home like a bomb. My husband passed away, and it was very unexpected, and I understood what staff were going through. We had over 13 of our individuals pass away since 2019, and our staff had been working with these individuals, some over 40 years. So I knew what they were going through, and I needed to make a change. I also want to take this time I have a bunch of people on here, so I'm asking each one of you if you could post at your job somewhere the National Suicide Prevention Hotline at 988. You can call or text. So my initial plan was to go gung ho and have one big project. And with the funding and getting the buy-in from staff, I had to phase it down into 4. So the first one, we put a room in Nevada. And let me show you that. It wasn't about looks so much as the importance of the things in the room. So we got a massage chair and a heat pad, and there's some stress balls in there, just wellness cards, and there's a radio that they can just play their music with headphones as loud as they want or as soft as they want. To get here, I thought that I was going to have to go in and make everything Holly, but it wasn't about me. So I had this plan of how do I get people to use this room and be proud of it. So I went to Nevada and I had one of the RCSs take this on as her own. She is amazing, very creative, and she got input from staff that I knew that I could not get. So staff then helped her decide what they wanted in the room to make this their own. And the very first week that this room was done, it was used every day by different shifts, and it's been a huge success. Phase 2, this is going to be in our Garza building. I'm going to have the same plan of having an RCS and one of our TPWs do this room. It's helped with the buy-in, and they're proud of their work, and they go to other homes and say, hey, have you checked out what I did in the sensory room or the Zen room? And it's been good. So, but I would like to, they want to add some adult coloring books in there, add some aromatherapy, add items like punching bags or heavyweights just to blow some steam off at a quick rate. Phase 3 is going to be outside for a memorial garden. This will give a safe space for staff to go with individuals. It gives a space to remember the individuals and staff who have passed away. And it's an outside space, so it's different. People who like nature. Also, we have buildings that are going to be destroyed as they cannot be entered anymore. And I want to take the pavers from those buildings and make the path for the different homes. So each path would have a different state name going to the people, a memorial spot for those people who used to live there. Phase 4 is a whole cottage space. So this was my original plan, was to take a whole cottage and make it different spaces. And I'll do that, but that's going to take about 2 years. So once staff have used the room, they know what they want in there, what helps them calm, stay relaxed. I'll take the rooms from Nevada and Garza and move that stuff over to the cottage, and also provide other spaces that the staff want to use to help with them. So each room will accommodate different techniques for calming. Is it sustainable? In the beginning, I didn't think it was going to be. And as staff have really gave tremendous feedback, the appreciation committee will now oversee the rooms. If anything gets broke, they'll replace it. And this appreciation committee will also be checking in with the supervisor to get feedback on if there's anything else that the rooms would need. I think to monitor if this works, I think we'll retain more staff. Since January, all of our new hires have stayed, which has been tremendous and a huge help. We're at a pretty good spot, knock on wood, right now. But I'm really promoting this from the very beginning in orientation to say, hey, you guys are going to be stressed. I know this is a stressful job. Here are these rooms that are provided to you. please use them, take the time, and make sure your mental health is okay too. And that is it. Does anybody have any questions?
No, you did a wonderful job, Holly, and definitely very thorough. I love this idea. I had a meeting with my team yesterday on purpose. And I guess it ties into kind of what you're saying, the sense of appreciation, but that concept was twofold. One, say thank you, and two, to check in. And I think that sometimes organizations, and especially public sector ones, treat their employees as if they're robots, right? That we just kind of like plug in for the morning and do our thing, and then plug disconnect at the end of the day. And the concept that I used last night or yesterday was the fact of like the last 3 years have been like sitting inside of a cement mixer. I know that you have gone through some personal tragedy, and I want to say that I'm impressed by the fact of your resiliency and the tragedy that you've gone through, and use that as a way to kind of help others and kind of reach out and be more empathetic to them and kind of be there saying, hey, we're all going to go through some tough times. So I really want to say that you've taken that strife and those issues that you had to deal with on a personal level to apply that back to your workplace and to kind of help others and reach out, pay it forward, is just amazing. So I want to say personally that I'm proud of you. Fantastic job. And I do think this is going to be helpful from a retention perspective as well. I hope that you're continue to see those trends. And I would say that just from an aesthetic perspective, when you walk into a facility and the employees are saying, hey, do you have something specifically for me to kind of chill out for a second? Even if I don't take advantage of it, the fact that you are endorsing this and supporting it, I think goes a long way. So, and it also, because of the clientele that you serve, I think it is important that you try to provide some peace, tranquility, and some consistency so that the folks that are receiving those services, are getting the maximum effort. So I just want to say congratulations, and I'm interested to see how this evolves over time, because the garden and the other things that you continue to work on. So that's great. I'm going to pass it over to Alexandra now for comments, questions, things like that.
All right, thanks, Rob. So I am going to start with some comments first. So I have some comments from Christine. Christine states, I really think your attempt at improving morale is evidenced in employee retention. Your industry has traditionally had a lot of turnover, and I'm speechless, to say the very least, that you've been able to retain staff.
Hard. I'm not gonna lie that going in, I took a few weeks off of work, and when I came back, I was gung-ho, and I, knock on wood, have not lost one staff since I have been doing the hiring and retention portion.
That's great. So Tiffany has a comment and a question. So she says, I love this. I think it's the best way to show our staff we care about them wholly as humans, as well as employees who serve other Ohioans. And then she also asks, have you had any shyness regarding the stigma of needing a mental break or those feelings of being overwhelmed?
No. Our staff have went through not only their own personal lives, but we've had a lot of death of our individuals on campus. And I think our staff have been trained in trauma-informed care, and they know the importance of mental health and having that time of just taking a break. So I have not noticed any stigma, and more support, actually.
Great. So a few more comments and then another question. So Kay says, Holly, great idea and ways to maintain a mental health of employees and clients. I'm so sorry for your loss. You are truly amazing to keep going through the difficult times and helping others to keep going. I would love to see this concept grow into more agencies. Great job. Matthew says, wonderful idea. The stress from direct support is clear and a relaxing space is needed. All right, I'm going to transition over to a question. So Donna she first states, great job. Can you talk about how you plan to track your project impact?
I don't have a real plan necessarily as much as the retention portion and monitoring our staff really using the rooms and if the rooms are adequate for what they need. So our RCSs are in with our TPWs every day, talking to them, asking them, how are you doing? How are you feeling? What can we provide you with? So just getting the feedback from those TPWs to RCSs, then that will be relayed to the appreciation committee.
Great, thank you. And Dylan says, if Holly's project isn't needed at your work, please let me know so I can apply. Great job.
I think every place of work should have one. It's just a room. The first one we did on Nevada, it doesn't even have a window. So we tried to make it a little colorful on the walls. The one we're going to use in Garza, it does have a window and bathrooms right there. So I think that will be a little helpful. But if you have an empty room, make it.
Rob, back to you. And then I'm happy to stay on and answer the one question in the chat as well once we transition.
Yeah, can we just hold that till the end? Do you mind if we just hold that as a summary thing at the end?
Yeah, certainly.
Cool. Well, I just wanted to say, Holly, congratulations again. Thanks for your effort on this. I really am proud again that you were able to persevere during difficult times. And the last comment I have for you is that I really want to say congratulations on making it not the Holly project, but finding a team to embrace and endorse and support this. I think it's really important to try to get other people to join you in a cause like this, especially because of the different perspectives, but then there's buy-in from the institution itself, and then the actual recipients of your efforts will also be engaged as well. So fantastic, great job, and you did it, and you did a great job. So hope you get a chance to, once you go into the Garza room or one of those other rooms and chill out for a minute, you definitely earned that. So I just want to say thanks again.
I am actually.
That's awesome. Great. Fantastic. We'll take 5 minutes for me. So great job. All right, we're going to move on to our next presenter. We have 2 more to go here. We are rounding third and heading home, but we're definitely on track and actually a few minutes ahead. So without further ado, we're going to introduce our next presenter. It is Josh Copper, and he is from the Ohio Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services. Josh's title is called Corrective Action Correction. And I'm excited about his report because this is a classic PMA, process improvement initiative. And so a lot of times you talk about take something within your work and trying to make it so it's more efficient and effective. And I think this is a perfect example of kind of what our vision was for these various project topics. So I just want to say thanks to Josh. I hope that what you're about to present has provided some benefit or will in the future. And without further ado, take it away.
My name is Josh Copper. I'm with the Ohio Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services. My project is making a new corrective action tracking system. I got a story for you. I will try to make this presentation as exciting as possible, but it is just creating a new database tracking system. So the tracking process for employees' corrective action, whether that be discipline or supplemental training given to them by the employer, supplemental to their success, and the workplace really as a whole. Without accurate information on historical corrective action, equitable corrective action could not be confidently applied to the employee, which means employees will start feeling like they're being treated differently. If this happens, it could lead to workplace upheaval and also confidence in the employee's breakdown. And the confidence would just fall apart with the employees and their employer. Okay, so before I move on to the project, I need to do a kind of a shameless plug to my department. I'm very proud of them. Our mission is to provide statewide leadership of high quality mental health and addiction prevention, treatment and recovery, and a treatment and recovery system that is effective and valued by all Ohioans. Explaining exactly what my staff does is hard. Actually, I lucked out. We recently had a Joint Commission survey, and one of the surveyors said something that I would like to share with you guys today. And it kind of really sums up the importance of what we do and the reason why not a lot of people is aware of what the good work that gets done within my department. So here we go. The names of the patients whose lives we save can never be known. Our contribution will be that what did not happen to them. And though they are unknown, we know that mothers, fathers are at graduations and weddings they would have missed, and the grandchildren will know grandparents they might never have known, and holidays will be taken, work will be completed, books will be read, symphonies will be heard, gardens will be tended that without our work would never have been. So we do this amazing work inside of 6 regional psychiatric facilities. We have North Coast Hospital, which is up in the Cleveland area. We have Heartland, which is northern Columbus. We have Appalachia, which is actually in Athens in Southeast Ohio. Then we have Northwest, which is up by Toledo. Then we have the best hospital, which is mine, Summit down in Cincinnati. And then we have Twin Valley, which is right in Columbus. Inside of each of these 6 regional psychiatric hospitals exists someone like me, a labor relations personnel. And my job is, if I can break it down into just a few small parts, would be that I advise managers. I make policy recommendations. I recommend corrective action for policy violations. And then I investigate and answer grievances for the unions. And actually, I offer guidance to the unions. Even though I am management, I'm still kind of the bridge between the union and management. So I have to maintain that relationship. And sometimes that means giving them guidance for proposing a new policy or something that they would like that would benefit their members. So those collective bargaining units, we have 3 of them that operate inside of my department. We have OCSEA, which is Ohio Civil Service Employee Association, the Service Employees International Union, District 1199, and the Unit 2 Association. And the agreements that we have with all 3 of the unions is the reason why we have to track our discipline. It is a contractual agreement that our corrective action, it follows certain steps and has certain rules to go along with it. So our corrective action levels in my department range from a written reprimand to a 1, 3, or 5-day working suspension. If you're exempt employee, you could actually be removed, but that doesn't really have anything to do with the bargaining agreements because they would be exempt employees. And finally, removal. All discipline has to be progressive. Written reprimands are retained for 2 years, and all suspensions are retained for 3 years. That is the main reason why it is incredibly important to have an accurate tracking system. And finally, my department utilizes a non-traditional corrective action, and we call it supervisory conferences. It's more like a supplemental training tool. From my standpoint, I use that for establishing that an employee knew about a work rule if I have to impose discipline onto them. So now we get to our problem. I was a relatively new LRO right around the time, the spring before PMA started. One of my first serious disciplines that I was going to issue, I looked into our old system. This employee had previous discipline, so I had to progress off of that. Finished the investigation, finished everything, all sent up to the director. Director signed off, delivered to the employee. I go to add that employee's new discipline to the old tracking tool, and I noticed that there was a different entry because this employee's name was entered differently for this new entry, and that entry was that he had his discipline modified through a grievance. So he should not have received the level of discipline that he received initially from me. So we fixed that. We got with the union, explained the issue. He was issued the appropriate corrective action. So now I'm going to show you why this happened. This is the project, is fixing this mess. So this spreadsheet was used since 2014. It has had 5 authors since then with varying computer knowledge and organizational skills. I could not sort the data at all, whether that be by date, because one of the entrants would enter the date with a period after the month in the year. So Excel does not recognize that as a date. Other issue, there's a color coding system that still to this day, I have no idea what it means. There is some other cells with some greens and some reds. I couldn't tell you what it means. The biggest issue was that the data was not normalized. And without data normalization, you cannot run reports. I could not, for instance, run a report to see how many written reprimands employees have, because if you notice in the cells, the type of disciplinary action that the employees received it varied, whether they put it in the resolution closed column or if they put it in the comments column, and they also called it written or written reprimand. You just couldn't sort that. And there was also lots of other data inputted into these cells that made it unusable. Lastly, something I couldn't show you is the names. I had to remove the names for confidentiality. The names were not standard, which is why I ran into the issue with the story that I told you. Some of the names were separated just by last name, period, first name. Some of them were just first and last name, then the opposite, last name, first name, or just even with a slash. None of this made sense. And the only way that we could resolve this issue would be to trash it, to just throw it away and make a new one. So now we know our problem. We know how to fix it. So in comes Public Management Academy. I knew I had this to do, so I just made this my project. So lining out the ideal tracking system would be for the data entries to have the same formatting with safeguards that could prevent invalid entries. And I'll get more into the type of safeguards that I imposed in just a moment. So another thing is, the ideal system would be if an employee had any type of corrective action, a profile then would be created for them. That profile could have their hire date, years of service, job title. All this information is needed when I'm actually entering their corrective action into the statewide system. And also this system would be managed by the LRO, but it would be better if it could be shared amongst the other managers. Managers need to know if disciplinary action has been imposed on their employees just for review, and also just having knowledge of the employees' issues. So this would be great, and we could all get on the same page, especially if I was able to push this out department-wide. That's my overall solution, and that would be the big gain. So to get started, I had to go through the old system and decide what information I would need to pull from that old system. So obviously, I would need any new discipline that I have issued. I would also need all the inactive disciplines, because I would need that historical data to make sure that future disciplines would be evenly applied to the employees. And lastly, all the supervisory conferences I would also want to pull, because again, those prove prior knowledge, as I mentioned before. So this was the painstaking part of this project. It took a very long time. I was the only one doing this. That was the selling point to my CEO, is that all I needed was time. I didn't need money. I didn't need anything. I just needed time to do this. So I had to comb through all the old data and fix the names, all the dates, the types of discipline, all the rules violated, and their union affiliation. This ended up being a total of 466 entries. After I finished that, I'm thinking mission accomplished. The hardest part of this project is all over. All I really need to do now is import the data to the new software and organize it. So the initial idea, like I said, was a database. This would allow for easy data manipulation and report generating. Unfortunately, the Department of Mental Health and Addictive Services does not utilize a uniform database software. I could get approval for database software. That's not a problem, but but I feared that this would weaken the expandability, since anyone who would also like to even view my software to view the tracking for the employees would also need to get approval for that software. I had to abandon the database idea. And without any other options, I had to fall back on old trustworthy Excel. Everyone had access to Excel. So that kind of saved what I thought was the most important part of this project, which was being able to share it amongst other people. So this decision did require me to modify my project deliverables. One big thing that I wanted was to be able to link actual documents to each discipline. So that would be the investigation, any other assigned documents by the employee that might be needed later. So utilizing Excel made this very difficult, if not impossible, and most of all, not user-friendly if someone else would want to manage it. So the biggest upside, like I said, most people have some familiarity with Excel. So navigating it and reading the information that would be on there shouldn't really be an issue. So with some simple safeguards, a little bit of training and instruction, I felt as if staff would be able to utilize this new tracking software. So I migrated all the data into Excel. I took all my normalized data and dumped it into its applicable sheets, that being active discipline, inactive discipline, supervisory conferences. And then I turned all the data into a table, which allowed me to gather statistical information, and more on that in a moment. As you can see, the spreadsheet is a lot cleaner. Some of the safeguards that I implemented was with my date columns. You cannot enter anything that is not in the format of month/day/year. It will not accept it. Also, you only have 4 options in the union exempt column: OCSEA, 1199, Unit 2, and exempt. The rules violated would only allow for numerical values. No more could you describe what happened, why the rules are violated in these areas. It could only be a numerical value. You could then describe what you would like in the history and comments section. You can be as wordy as you want in that section. And lastly, the corrective action column only allowed for written reprimand, 1, 3, or 5 day working suspension. The only difference between this and my supervisory conference sheet was that the corrective action allowed for supervisory conferences in that sheet. So reports. I keep constant 2 types of reports up, mainly this one that you're seeing here. It allows me to see level 4 violations, which are our discretional violations. So the level of discipline we would give is discretionary to us, but we still have to base that on historical data if available. So I always need to do research on those type of rule violations. And I left a little instruction sheet. These type of instructions that's in the blue is something that future users will be able to see throughout the sheet. It kind of tells them how to interact with this particular report. Also, I wanted readily available what levels of discipline are active with all my employees. For instance, right now I have 48 written reprimands throughout my hospital, 423 employees. If I wanted to see, for instance, who had the 1 day working suspension, I could just advance that table there, and it would tell me the name, and I could go to it and I could pull the record and see exactly what happened. So I needed to test this. And so what you see here is a table that is a breakdown of my primary goals and how I evaluated them. My normalized data was locked in. My data couldn't no longer be altered because of the safeguards I put in. So that goal was very successful. Also, because of the normalized data, my searchable data, which would allow me to run reports, things of that nature, was also successful because I have it locked down where you can only enter certain things into each category. The user-friendly goal was the only issue that I found when testing. The member of human resources that I specifically selected her because her lower level of computer literacy, she struggled really with just how to generate a report. but this really isn't an issue with the project. It's just an issue with the software used. I figured I would supply more of the how-tos that should nullify the issue in the future. So the next part, expansion. So as I work with the software, I'm constantly checking the information and historical entries against the old software. This is to ensure that I didn't make an error when I was fixing the data. Data entry is a high level of human error. So I have not found an error in over 3 months that I've been working with this. Oh, sorry about that. I accidentally ended the slide. 1 second. Sorry about that again. So right now I'm currently providing reports to department managers that allow them to see their departmental policy violation issues. For example, my occupation therapy department, she was having some issues with attendance violations with her employees. So I was able to produce information for her that 82% of her department had some type of attendance policy violation. As the manager, she was able to meet with the group as a collective and give accurate information. And we were able to figure out that applying just a basic flexible schedule, because their current start time had them all running into traffic. Several of them lived in the same area. They were hitting trains. So we were able to use that to go to the CEO to get them more of a flexible start time. And we just shifted their day a little. And since then, we haven't really had much of an attendance issue with them. So I plan on rolling the software out to allow managers to view it in teams later this year. Sadly, as a department, I am not alone with having an unreliable tracking system. I've spoken with other hospitals within my department, and they all seem to have some issues, and we all use different methods. My central office is very interested in having someone utilize the same tracking for our discipline. We're looking to make this a departmental project for our labor team, possibly next year. Something that's going to help with that is I actually just accepted a new position at our central office on that labor team. So now that I've deployed this here at my hospital in Summit, I will be able to deploy this at our central office level to manage our central office. So having it at 2 sites will make it a lot easier to push it out to the other hospitals. That's my presentation. I would like to thank all of our amazing instructors from PMA, as well as all of you for taking the time to hear my presentation. Very special thank you to Rob and Alexandra. You guys have really organized a fantastic program. I can't stress that enough. I've used the information to better myself, my department, I hope, and my career. Thank you.
Thanks, Josh. I love this project. First of all, I wanted to say that that one slide, and this is, I really mean this, the Captain Excel slide. I literally wanted to be Captain Excel for Halloween one day, but in my head I looked like that slide, except in reality I didn't have the muscles. But I didn't do that. My wife kind of suggested that I pick a different costume because I was going to get made fun of already as it was. But I love the Captain Excel. But no, seriously, I like the fact of how you decided to use an Excel spreadsheet. And I don't know if you've ever been through the Lean Ohio Boot Camp or other programs that are out there across the state, but the idea of buying another software package and the access and the training and all that kind of stuff, sometimes it makes things more expensive and more complicated. So sometimes using a simpler tool that's easily accessible is the best solution. So I want to give you a compliment there. And then I love the fact of how you streamline things and limited access and set the exact parameters for each one of those columns. So hopefully that is going to be, impactful for you. I guess the question I have is, you mentioned about meeting with one of your peers about, what her usability and questions that you have. Are you creating any kind of job aids or user guides, or is there any kind of training component to this to make sure people?
Yes, mainly with report running. on each sheet, it's going to have the instructions in the blue that you saw, letting people know you are limited to entering only this type of character into this column. But whenever you generate a report, like interacting with that report, so the one that I used for finding out my level 4 infractions, there was a little manipulation they needed to do on the side if they wanted to find out, for instance, type of discipline is imposed for level 1 infractions, or so on and so forth. If they wanted to modify that report in any way, there is a little bit of instruction for them on how to do it.
You mentioned your new, hopefully promotion and a new job. So I would say congratulations. Be the first one on to say congratulations. And do you think then you'll be able to then expand this system out to all the other units, or just in your own?
Yeah, actually, who my new boss is, that's one of the things that she said she wanted me for. She wants everyone on the same page for this. So yeah, that's one thing that I'll be doing. So having it here at Summit and it being successful, next I'll implement it at our central office level, because I'll be managing the employees there too. Then once I have it working great at 2 sites, all the bugs really should be worked out of it by then, and pushing it out to the other hospitals should be very easy.
Well, congratulations on the new opportunity. And this is again why I love these kind of PMA projects. And thank you for the compliments. And it's a passion project for myself and Alexander, but we appreciate days like today to see the results, and also the feedback that we get to make sure that we're doing the right stuff. So appreciate it. And I'm going to pass the baton to Alexandra. Can you take it away if there are other questions and comments?
Yeah, certainly. So I will start with some comments. Mary says it was terrific, very interesting, and it has obviously given you a springboard to future career goals. Managing people is never easy, especially in a union environment. All right, Kay says great presentation. Loved the humor of Seinfeld and Captain Excel into the presentation. Loved how you used what was available to all in order to share information, and we'll be using Teams to share beyond. Great job. So some questions. First one is from Brian. Nice work. Are you concerned with how well the solution will be kept up as you move into a new job?
They have to keep it up, actually. Like I said, like with the bargaining units, we have to track this information. And yes, it's tracked on a statewide program that anyone who has worked with O grievance will tell you is not very reliable. And that's why we are told to maintain it locally and put it into the statewide version. Also, we can give more details, since it's only managers seeing that. With the O grievance, even the unions get to see the entries there. Yeah, so they don't really have a choice to manage it.
Great. Few more questions. So Sean asks, as a board member for Unit 2 Association, I love this project. I'm rooting for your success, and I hope we can duplicate it in the other departments the bargaining unit represents. What use does tracking inactive and historical discipline have in current or future discipline?
Mainly for this department, since we utilize a discretionary level, maintaining knowledge of those past instances on what we did, just so we can be equitable to future employees. Meaning delivering them the same level of discipline for someone with a similar infraction in the past.
So Jared asks, was there consideration given to using MS Access since it's more readily available than other databases, or do you think using Excel will be sufficient long-term?
I actually thought I could just use Access. That's what I originally thought, because my department that I came from was ODRC. So I just assumed everyone would have access to Access like I did in DRC, but no. Access is not something that everyone just gets. You have to request permission for that. So yeah, I initially wanted to build it on Access. I'm still kind of sad about that.
So Rob, I will pass it over to you.
Great job. Congratulations on both the project and the new position, the promotion, and please keep us posted on your success as you matriculate through the system there. And if there's anything we can do to help you with this, your transition, Our next presenter is going to be Brian Benjamin, our last presenter of the day for PUCO. Wanted to bring up Brian to the stage now to close us out. Our last, but definitely not least, presenter for today is Brian Benjamin from the Public Utilities Commission of Ohio. And again, I believe he's got a project called Damage Prevention Invoicing, which again, I think falls under the classic PMA project. And so I'm looking to hear kind of what he's talking about as far as enhancing their invoicing capacity. So without further ado, I'd like to pass the baton over to Brian. Take it away.
All right. As Rob mentioned, my name is Brian Benjamin. I am a finance manager at the Public Utilities Commission of Ohio. I did my project on damage prevention invoicing. To start, what is damage prevention? It is better known as call before you dig. It's the service operated by Ohio Utilities Protection Services. We call them OOPS. And with that, it's really just individuals that are performing a dig must call star 811 48 hours prior to digging. And what OOPS will then do is inform the utilities in the area who then mark the lines for excavators. All utilities are required to be members of OOPS. And here's an action right here. Of course, I'm on the finance side, so if I get something wrong, I apologize. This is someone marking a line right now. I believe that device is detecting metal pipes underneath the grass there, and he is marking the direction in which they go. Damage prevention laws for excavators. From what I could find, the first law was in '89. And there's in the EORC, there's 3781.25 to 3781.32 that specifically mentions who excavators are, what excavators are considered and members are considered, and the laws that they need to follow. There was not a regulatory arm to this code section until 2016 when 491301 through 491352 gave the Public Utilities Commission of Ohio regulatory authority. Okay, and so the PCO's role in this process, essentially, we react to cases or we react to complaints. The PCO will receive a complaint and will go out and investigate the complaint. They will then present the findings to the Underground Technical Committee, UTC, which is a committee made up of 17 appointed experts in the field who basically make the decision on, we'll hear the facts of the case and make a decision on whether they receive a civil forfeiture or training or who's at fault, et cetera. Just to go back, typically the main issues are not calling 811 prior to a dig, the utility company not responding in the 48 hours it is required to, or the dig digging in an area too close to an area that was marked. So in regards to the PUCO's role, and specifically for me, PUCO Finance, we do have allocation of resources to damage prevention. We do have our staff investigate the complaints. We have approved appropriations of over $350,000. You may have noticed that the title of my project is damage prevention invoicing. Anyone familiar with the budgetary process and for state agencies, we have the permission to use $350,000. However, we need that money in that specific fund to pay for that $350,000. So what we are able to do is invoice the excavators and the members up to $50 annually, a registration fee to be an excavator member, et cetera. And basically it's to offset our costs to do our piece of the regulation. It has been done once. In 2016, we did a invoicing. We received a list from the OOPS call center. The list was a CV or CSV, and it contained over 30,000 rows of companies who had called the OOPS call center within the past year. We, off of that list, invoiced those companies $25 a piece. And it was a very manual process. Doing a mail merge off of a very large 30,000 file, 30,000 row file was very cumbersome, took a lot of manual work. And there were some other processes inside of that took a lot. And it was a little more overwhelming than we had anticipated. I wasn't quite there yet, but they had anticipated. So technology modernization efforts at PECO. In 2017, we did move our invoicing systems, or begin moving our invoicing systems to Salesforce. We started with our annual assessment. It's for a utility regulation. It's the main funder of the PUCO for about $35 million a year. That went live in 2017, same year. We brought someone in to create that for us. We eventually moved transportation systems to Salesforce in 2019. There was an intention to do damage prevention shortly thereafter. In 2020, we ended, our consultants began the process, fact finding and the general idea, coding a little bit, but when their contract was up that fiscal year, they opted to not bid again. So in late 2021, October 2021, after a month or so into the class, I did submit a project request form to IT steering committee that was approved to become a project. With this, we brought in OCM, Ohio Change Management, and Lean Ohio members of staff. We have a lot of those in-house. We're very much encouraged to take these trainings and get our green belts and things like that. With that, we completed a SIPOC with the stakeholders, compiled pain points from the previous experience, and created process maps for the future state. So what is a SIPOC? It stands for suppliers, inputs, process, output, customers. It's really just a tool used to get everybody to just identify who our stakeholders are, what processes are needed, what things are created from this process. And it really just helps you understand who you need to bring into the table in discussions, and what the end output needs to be from the entire project. It's incredibly similar to a logic model. Very similar, in fact. It's a tool that is really used used by Lean Ohio quite a bit. As I said, we bring them in for all of our projects. So we always have to do, first step is always to do a SIPOC. Here's what it looks like for this particular, for damage prevention registration, invoicing, and payment process. You'll see the suppliers, you'll see OOPS, the registrants, the excavators themselves, PUCO staff, etc. The inputs, of course, the list, payments, all of this, all of these are listed there. And for there, the process to get the outputs. And we put just a very high level process at the bottom, where it's just receive and validate the list, generate the invoices, collect and deposit the payments. Really, the main focus of what we're doing. Of course, we also have other things, handled return mail. We have, as I said, there was almost 30,000 on the first file. Sometimes the addresses are bad, and even a small percentage of that is still a lot. Identify non-payers and initiate collection effort. And you'll notice process refunds isn't necessarily connected to the next one, but that's another main thing that we needed to worry about, just because it's we had quite a few duplicate accounts on our file. We tried our best to deduplicate it, which I'll talk a little bit more in a moment. And if an entity paid twice, we had to refund one of those payments. As I also said, we worked on pain points, and this is what we came up with.
Hey, Brian?
Yeah.
I just want to know if can you adjust the actual slide at all? It's sort of over. Can you reduce it a little bit too, or maybe move it over towards yourself a little bit? Sorry about that. It seems like
I'm not sure I understand. I'm sorry.
That's perfect. That's good. That's better. It just was kind of covered up over to the left side, so it's better now that it's more in the central.
Oh, it's weird. Okay. Yeah, sorry about that. So our pain points, the main pain point that was brought up was data cleanup. As I mentioned, there were a lot of duplicates. When I say duplicates, perhaps the customer service agent with OOPS would receive a call, and the first time they get the call, it's Brian's Excavating LLC, writes that down. The next time Brian's Excavating calls, maybe they don't put the LLC, or maybe they put LDOT, CDOT, or any kind of variation of that. And in that file, if the name differentiated, OOPS would send all unique names. And in that case, that just meant we would get multiples of companies, and these companies called quite a bit. So standardization of the name wasn't a priority for the call center, because they're worried about just getting the lines marked. It's not something that they necessarily need. Another thing that happened quite a bit was non-excavators were billed. We worked with the OOPS on coming up with logic back in 2016 on who needed to be a part of the list. And they came up with people that called, I think it was like 5 times in a year. Kind of an infamous, at least for the PCO case, was the governor's mansion at the time, John Kasich. They had called like 7 or 8 times for work that was being done around the property, and we had sent a bill to the governor's mansion for this, and politically that was not a very good move on our part, but it's also very hard to kind of distinguish who's on there when there's, as I said, about 30,000 rows of data. Other issues, age data. We asked for a year's worth of data from OOPS. And some of these companies, by the time we sent out an invoice to them, it had been 14 months since they had called. Companies go out of business every day, and it made it very hard to collect a lot of the debt, especially when we considered it a registration fee, which is more for future use of excavating. We also initially, we understood that there would be a lot of payments coming through. So we really wanted the people getting these invoices to pay online. And what happened is a lot of these companies just wouldn't pay online, and that's understandable. They would send a check to the PCO, and the amount of checks that were received was more than staff were willing to or was able to handle. We're not a very big fiscal department. We have one person, at least at the time, we had one person that deposited checks, and that was just really inundated them with a lot of work. So then we came up with an invoicing template that had to go to a lockbox we shared with the Ohio Shared Services. And with that, and they did a great job, and they helped us out a lot. But the processing was delayed. It was also hard for us to take what they had deposited and be able to decipher exactly which invoice it went against. And again, we took that initial file, and they were using that to also track the invoices. I also received way too many phone calls for the 2 members that really worked on damage prevention, their phone queue. We had to train the call center on kind of like first level knowledge of damage prevention and what the invoice might be for. Also received a lot of return mail. And then also a future state that we thought of was that we really need to make sure we figure something out for the AG collection process. By the time we sent things to the Attorney General, I was there. I just started at the PUCO, and I think I sent him or sent them rather something like 5,000 invoices in their backup documentation to the Attorney General. Okay, so to go into how do we address a few of the points, the major points, we worked with OOPS to provide a standard file with no formatting on a quarterly basis. And I'd also worked to take care of the age data issue. What we wanted to do with that is the original file also had some merge cells, and it was might not have been as consistent as we would like it, which made it really hard to, if we wanted to import this file into anything. They also agreed to provide additional fields, which helped us differentiate companies and how many times they called, what type of caller they were. And then we went out and we procured some very strong deduplication software that works with our Salesforce environment. So that'll allow us to take out a lot of the manual process, which is trying to find all the duplicates that were within the file. Then we created a process to keep damage prevention data separate from other system data until the data is cleaned with demand tools. And what we did there is, well, actually, I'll talk about that in a little bit. And then to reduce non-excavator invoicing, a major change, we decided we weren't going to send them an invoice right away. Instead, we're going to send them instructions to take a questionnaire on our website with a PIN that is unique to their company, and they can self-certify essentially whether or not they need to be invoiced for damage prevention. So basically, receive the letter, it has a PIN, they go to that website, enter the PIN, and then answer a few questions, and we're able to make a determination of whether they are considered an excavator or not. We pretty much already know all the members, we already regulate them, but that is also part of the questions as well. Payment processing, we have modernized a bit our payment processing in terms of with the invoice coming from Salesforce. We do have a connection to a third-party payment provider. It's called CBOS, and they, when a payment is made, they are able to call back to us and let us know that the invoice is paid. So we also take e-check, but that's checking our savings account, and just the typical Visa, MasterCard, and Discover are also accepted. We also have a new lockbox associated directly with a key bank. They have an integration file that is sent to us every morning, basically of all the checks that were received. And if the check came in with either an invoice number in the memo or backup documentation with an invoice number, that file will tell us the check number, the amount, and the invoices that were associated with that check. If there's not any, our staff will, or if there's no documentation with the check, our staff will go in and review it the next morning. And additionally, we also had in-house check software where we have a scanner just like you would see at any bank, and it will scan it into the bank, but it will also look within Salesforce and look for the account name and try to match it to an open invoice associated with that account name. And there's kind of a little bit of an AI piece to that too, because when we get a payment and say it's from Brian's excavating again, but it doesn't exactly match what's in our system, or it wasn't able to tell, it'll remember next time they receive a Brian's excavating check, like, hey, it goes here. This is the account within your org that this payment was for last time, and it'll try to find the invoice that it matches to. Process mapping. I'm not expecting you guys to read this. This is probably very, very tiny on your computer as it is mine, but it was an exercise we did after we do the SIPOC, and we get an idea of what a process might look like. And this really helps the developers understand all of the situations that they need to plan for. Basically, it's just saying, we get the file and what happens after that. So at a high level, we received the file from OOPS. SMED, which is our Service Monitoring and Enforcement Division, will receive the file from OOPS on a quarterly basis. From there, they will work with IT and import the file into SIT, which is a sandbox, basically a duplication of our production. And it's escaping me right now exactly what that means. I'm sure Matt will tell me here shortly. And from there, we'll duplicate the file. We came up with a pretty good process where we import the file in, not as an account, which it will ultimately reside in, but as a damage prevention staging account, which allowed us to differentiate it again from the other data in our system. Only the file data is going into that account, and it'll be removed once we move this forward into production, so that the next file can be just that information would be in that object. So anyways, from there, we would go through and deduplicate that file, or now that damage prevention staging object. And from there, we'll spit out all of the unique records from there. And then we will import them into our production environment where we will ultimately, or where the information will ultimately reside and be invoiced and all of that. If the company is already in our system, perhaps they made a phone call to our call center, perhaps they're also a transportation company, or somehow they're also already regulated by us in some other manner. There's going to be there's a field on their account that just says damage prevention eligibility. That field is going to go from blank to unknown. If we are, again, we are using the duplication software to identify this. If it isn't in our system already, which a majority of the first time will be, or in general, almost most of them will be, it's going to import it in as a new file and then do the same thing. Damage prevention eligibility will be checked as unknown. From there, the next day, automatic process will run at 3 in the morning to create a mailing for that questionnaire. Actually, not questionnaire sent. I think I probably mislabeled this. That information to get to the questionnaire letter will be sent, and a date will be populated on the account indicating that we sent the letter to the company. And what'll really just create is a big PDF file that we will then send to state printing, who handles all of our mass printing needs, and we'll send out the letter to them. Hopefully, and this is the smooth path. The questionnaire will be taken by the customer. They'll go online, fill out the survey. If they answer yes to any question, there's a caveat there. One question actually needs 2 yeses, but if any question has a yes or is completed with a yes, then they would be determined as damage prevention eligible. If there's all no's or ends in all no's, they would be considered not eligible. So that unknown flag would be switched over to yes or no after they take the questionnaire. They can request a physical questionnaire as well if that's how they want to fill it out. So they click yes. An invoice is automatically created. They can select the Pay Now feature and pay that invoice right away. If no, they'll receive a mailed and emailed invoice shortly thereafter. They get about 45 days to pay their invoice. Invoices will then be created automatically on the anniversary date of their eligibility determination every year moving forward. Okay. I don't know if you guys can see this. I'm hoping to be able to do a quick demo. Please let me know in a second if you can see what I'm explaining. But you'll see here, this is the letter they'll receive, the initial letter. More or less just letting them know what damage prevention is, call before you dig, letting them know that they had called there a certain amount of times, or not, I don't think it necessarily says a certain amount of times, but they were considered an entity that does, or they're thought to be an entity that does business in this sector. Go here, put in your PIN, submit the form, all that. So this is in UAT, which is user acceptance training or testing, sorry. But to kind of go through with that, they should go here and then click damage prevention. Technically, it should be a different, I'm having the name change as I went through this exercise. I realized it doesn't match the letter perfectly. But anyways, we're here, we click damage prevention. Can everyone see the website? Rob?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay, so here we are. So we're now about to take the questionnaire. We want to put in the PIN. To keep me from going back and forth, I'm just going to put the auto-filled one. And then it asks you, hey, is this the right company? All right, yes. We then give them most of these companies won't have a contact already listed. So they would click add contact, as in this is the person that's taking the eligibility questionnaire. In this case, I'm just going to select someone that's already myself as a contact on here. Go to next. And here's the questionnaire. You'll see question 1 has a second part. Both, if this is yes, then it becomes open. And then you can just answer these based on what your company does. These are basically the questions that goes back to, and you'll see the ORC in 3781-25, specific to this is how we define you as a member or an excavator. In this case, we are eligible here. So yeah, one of the caveats, which would have been the governor's mansion caveat, is that if they said yes to excavations, but they own the property, or it was only in one location, then they're really not considered an excavator. So I go to next. I always wanted these flipped, but that's okay. Now it's going to ask you for a billing contact. I go to next, and then you'll see here, it's been determined today that my company is an excavation company, and I have a $50 invoice that I need to pay. I can click done, and then a batch job will run later in the day, and invoices will be mailed and emailed to the billing contact that I just listed. I'm just going to go ahead and pay it now. This then integrates with our already with software that's already out there, our guest payment feature for all of our invoices. They can go in and just put in some information and find their invoice without having to log in and take up a Salesforce license. If all they're really doing is going in and paying. Pay selected invoice. Submit. Okay. Got a little nervous that my credit card information is going to show up. 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Of course, as I said, this isn't an actual this isn't actually live. This is in UAT, but just to kind of give you a gist of it. Oh my gosh. Again, ask me to confirm. Now I've paid. And in production, this would actually take you to a confirmation page, but in UAT, it does not. But that's basically how the product works that we worked on and designed. So where are we now? Code is actually been passed UAT. So it is available to go to production. Some of it has not gone just because we were not ready. At least the SMED department was not ready, because we've asked for the file and haven't quite gotten it yet. And we expected that it was going to take a couple of weeks to get through it. We have received it now. We determined that we were going to wait till at least July because we were cutting it close and timing wise. So myself and the CFO, we went to the controlling board and moved our appropriation from last fiscal year to this fiscal year, so that then we can just have a real clean break between really the increased expenses we're going to see here shortly with the cost of printing and how we'll be able to allocate a lot of working hours towards damage prevention. So we should be sending them out. The plan is to send them out in 2 weeks, the first questionnaire. So we are certainly currently working on the deduplication process, at least SMED and ITR. And with a plan of just moving forward on around August 1st. There's still a few pending items that we're hoping, now that we've gone through it a few times, or kind of looked through it and seen some things that don't quite match up, that we want to be fixed. And there's a few enhancements. For instance, I want to be able to change the amount of the fee when we want to, and we'll be able to track what it was on each year, because we're actually going to make the fee $35 for them this year. We think that should be ample to cover our cost. So with that being said, I just want to thank you guys all so much. The staff and the students were so helpful. Really enjoyed talking with all of you and learning from all of you. And of course, the project staff here at the PUCO, they did a lot and not a whole lot of time to get this up and running. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. Just want to say, first of all, thank you for adjusting on the fly today and moving your presentation up so that we can all enjoy lunch a little sooner. So thank you. I also want to say I compliment you. I do, again, love these kind of classic process improvement initiatives and using technology to advance your cause there. So I think that that's great. And I also probably from a customer service perspective, probably gonna get a better return rate and participation rate and hopefully get these things processed sooner. So I can definitely see that. You mentioned the concept of using the Lean Ohio office. Do you pretty much do you work with them on every project, or is that
a lot of the bigger ones we do? This one, it was a little more upfront, I think, because the SMED department I talked about, and towards the end, we would typically have like a marketing communication blitz at the end that OCM would help us out with a lot. And we used to have someone that I don't really understand quite their role was with OCM, but they worked with us. And actually she was part of finance for a while, and she was really big into OCM and the communications piece of that and process improvement. So yeah, we work with them a lot, and we have a lot of Lean Ohio staff in our at PECO as well. They're very much encouraged to take those, get their green belts or whatever the belts are. I haven't gotten one, but it is definitely a big piece of what we're trying to implement at the PECO.
Well, I just wanted to definitely put a plug out to that organization. It's already built into our process improvement tools session. So the Lean Ohio office is a great resource for these kind of projects. We're actually going to be, as we look to do continuous improvement for our program for PMA, we're actually going to expand that part, the process improvement tools, to a 2-day session, because we feel like these tools like the SIPOC that you mentioned and the process mapping are key tools you can add to your toolbox. So I'm glad that, and hopefully the idea about a process improvement, the process mapping is that you're not to use all the fancy terminology on all the boxes, but that your group gets a better idea of actually how the operation works. And so that people are informed. So hopefully that was a benefit.
I think it's, yeah, absolutely. I think it's such a benefit, especially as those that are kind of like an administrative role, such as me in finance, those in IT, those in HR, to really see what everyone else does and get a better understanding. Again, we're just taking the money. There's so much more that other pieces are doing. And I think it's helpful to know that. And honestly, when they get their invoices, they're going to ask us questions, and it's good for us to be a part of those talks on the process improvements and the mapping and the SIPOCs to get a better understanding of what goes into it.
Did this go live? Have you started this, or is it still? I think I read this.
Live-ish. Everything. The code has been approved in UAT back in. We hit our date. We wanted it done by the first or 2nd of June. I think the first working day of June, it was approved, and a lot of it was in production. There were some updates that they didn't want to do until specifically like website updates and kind of pointing to like that damage prevention link I clicked that took me to the questionnaire. That's not up yet, and there's a couple other things like that. We don't want people to go in there and start playing with stuff until we're actually ready to send out those questionnaires and they're ready to be taken.
When is that phase of the project?
We should be sending everything in October 1st. We should be deploying the remaining bits of code that were held back, with us moving the questionnaires probably at some point at that week. So very soon. I thought I'd have it all the way completed by now, and I'd give you more of probably the real pain points of the implementation and all that, but it hasn't happened yet, but we do plan on that happening in the next couple of weeks.
Well, that's another opportunity to bring back the Lean Ohio people to do it.
There you go. Yep.
Right. Well, I'm going to stop at jibber jabber, and I'm going to pass the baton over to Alexandra. Is there any questions or comments or feedback for Brian?
Thanks, Rob. So far, no questions, just some comments. So Mary says, great slides, clearly demonstrated concepts from class. Spur coat is also a nice touch.
Thank you.
Matthew says data duplications are hard to deal with after you fall into the trap. Great plan moving forward. I would suggest having a pick list for state defaulting to Ohio, by the way.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's I will say in the actual production environment, Matt, and I think we're talking about CBOS. I believe it copies over all the information from the billing or from the contact that's paying over to CBOS. But I'm not 100% sure. I think it does all of that, and then they can update it. I know we've had some problems with fraud alerts because they put a different address in as their contact address, and not their billing address. But I believe all of that stuff is automatically populated from what we have in our system on a typical payer.
We have one from Tiffany. Great work on this process. We call the oops ourselves. You can see the amount of folks you have seeking services, lots of data.
Yeah, and we had mentioned, I mentioned the years long file that was sent. When going through testing, and we did get a file for like 2021 data for like 2 quarters, and there was a little over 20, I think there was like 27,000 or so. And when we got done with the deduplication, it was down to 20. So just to give you an idea of how rampant it can happen. And it's, it's really just a differences in priority, I think.
All right, so Rob, back to you.
I wanted to say thank you to Brian again, a great presentation, and to all of our day 2 presenters. Just knocked out of the park as usual. I just really want to say that this has just been a fantastic experience for me. I feel like every time I sit through these project presentations, I'm getting another master's degree. And so just the level of professionalism and dedication and expertise that you've put into these, just been really amazing. And then secondly, the diversity of these projects, the overall scope of where we're looking to advance, the public service. So I just want to say thank you for everything you've done.